Michael Thompson stood in the military courtroom, his shoulders squared despite the weight pressing down on them. The judge's bench loomed before him like the edge of a cliff. 6 uniformed officers sat in rigid formation to his right, their faces impassive as stone. The charge hung in the air, interfering with military operations, obstruction of justice, criminal trespass on government property. Felonies all, enough to put him away for years. He could feel Sarah's presence behind him. Though he couldn't see her, he knew she wore her full dress blues, ribbons and medals gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. The same uniform that had once been torn and bloodied when he'd found her. He knew she was fighting to keep her composure, to maintain the rigid discipline that had carried her through war zones and operating rooms. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was something worse. Michael's fingers traced the crack across the face of the marine chronometer in his palm. The brass felt cool against his skin, the glass fractured in a pattern like a spiderweb frozen in time. The hands still pointed to 11:47, just as they had for the past 18 months. He'd grown accustomed to the weight of it in his pocket, a constant reminder of things that couldn't be fixed. In the corridor outside, 8-year-old Emma sat on a wooden bench, legs swinging, not quite reaching the floor. A social worker sat beside her, attempting casual conversation while keeping a professional distance. On Emma's lap was a drawing pad, her small fingers working busily with colored pencils, creating a family portrait of 3 figures holding hands against a bright blue sky. The head judge cleared his throat, drawing Michael's attention back to the moment at hand. "Mr. Thompson, before we deliver our verdict, do you have anything final to say in your defense?" Michael looked up, his voice steady despite everything. "I did what anyone would have done. I'd do it again tomorrow." The judge exchanged glances with his colleagues. "Very well. This court has reached a decision regarding the charges against 18 months earlier. 6:00 a.m. The parking lot behind Millbrook General Hospital was empty except for Michael's 10-year-old Honda Civic. Its blue paint faded from years under the Midwestern sun. The overnight shift had been mercifully quiet. 3 minor car accidents, an elderly man with chest pain that turned out to be indigestion, and a college student with alcohol poisoning. Standard fare for a Thursday night in a town like Millbrook. Michael leaned against his car, the cool metal a relief against his back after 12 hours on his feet. 8 years as a paramedic had taught him to savor these quiet moments between the chaos. He pulled the marine chronometer from his pocket, a ritual that marked the end of every shift. His thumb traced the crack in the glass, a spiderweb of fractures that radiated from the center like frozen lightning. The hands were frozen at 11:47, the exact moment that Linda's car had been hit 18 months ago. The rising sun painted the eastern sky in watercolors of pink and gold, the light catching on the morning dew that clung to the sparse landscaping around the hospital parking lot. Michael should have been tired after a full shift, but adrenaline still hummed through his system, that familiar post-shift insomnia that made sleep impossible despite his exhaustion. That's when he saw her. At first, he thought she was just a shadow against the old pickup truck at the far end of the lot. Then the shadow moved, stumbled, fell against the rusted fender of the truck. Michael's training kicked in before conscious thought. He was moving toward her, assessing as he closed the distance. Female mid-30s, military fatigues torn and bloodied. Marine Corps judging by the uniform. Dog tags caught the early light as she swayed on her feet. "Ma'am, I'm a paramedic. Can you tell me what happened?" She looked up, her eyes struggling to focus. Blood matted her short brown hair on one side, and her left shoulder was a mess of torn fabric and congealing blood. Her olive skin had the gray pallor of significant blood loss. "Help," she managed the word barely audible. Then her knees buckled. Michael caught her before she hit the asphalt, lowering her gently to the ground. The wound on her shoulder looked like a gunshot, the entry neat, but the exit a ragged tear. Not fresh, maybe 12 hours old, but still seeping blood. She needed a trauma center immediately. Protocol dictated he call for backup, get a gurney from the ER, bring her in through proper channels. But Millbrook General wasn't equipped for this kind of trauma, and the bureaucracy would waste precious minutes. St. Mary's Hospital was 15 minutes away, with a level 1 trauma center and military affiliations. 8 years of following rules flashed through Michael's mind, weighed against the shallow breathing of the woman in his arms. He made his decision. "I'm going to help you, but we need to move fast." He scooped her up, surprised at how light she felt despite her muscular frame. "I'm taking you to St. Mary's. They can help you better than we can here." He carried her to his car, carefully placing her in the passenger seat. As he fastened her seatbelt, her eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with sudden clarity. "You'll lose your job for this," she whispered through blood-stained lips. The words sent a chill down Michael's spine, not because of their content, but because of the certainty in her voice. Her gaze drifted to the broken chronometer he'd set on the dashboard. She stared at it for a long moment. "Some things can't be fixed." The words were barely audible, her breath a ghost against his cheek as he leaned in to check her pulse. Then her eyes rolled back and she was unconscious again. Michael slammed the door and ran to the driver's side, firing up the engine and peeling out of the parking lot with more speed than caution. The early morning streets were nearly empty, each red light an eternity, as he watched her breathing grow more labored. Blood soaked through the makeshift pressure bandage he'd applied to her shoulder, forming a dark stain against the light gray of his car's upholstery. He'd been a paramedic for 8 years. He'd seen hundreds of trauma cases, from car accidents to gunshot wounds to industrial accidents. But something about this woman unsettled him on a level he couldn't explain. The way she'd looked at his broken watch, the certainty in her voice when she'd predicted his downfall. How could a dying woman see straight into his soul? The drive to St. Mary's took 12 minutes that felt like hours. Every red light a countdown to disaster. Every bump in the road eliciting a small moan from his passenger, though she remained unconscious. When they finally arrived at the emergency entrance, her fingers had somehow wrapped around the chronometer on the dashboard. He had to gently pry it from her grip before helping her out of the car. The emergency room staff responded with practiced efficiency when Michael burst through the doors with the wounded Marine in his arms. They took over immediately, transferring her to a gurney and wheeling her away while firing questions at Michael that he couldn't fully answer. Female mid-30s gunshot wound to the left shoulder, approximately 12 hours old. Significant blood loss. BP is 90/60 and dropping, pulse thready. That's all I know. A nurse eyed his paramedic uniform. "You're not from our ambulance service." "Millbrook General, found her in our parking lot. We're not equipped for this level of trauma." The nurse's expression made it clear she understood what he wasn't saying, that he'd bypassed proper channels and transport protocols. She nodded once professionally, then turned to follow the trauma team, leaving Michael alone in the suddenly quiet reception area, blood on his uniform, and the broken chronometer clutched in his hand. By 7:30, Michael was back home in his small rental house on Maple Street. The morning light filtered through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. The house felt too quiet without Emma's morning chatter. His 8-year-old daughter was spending the week with his sister in Cleveland, a spring break adventure that had come at exactly the right time, though Michael hadn't known it when he'd put her on the plane 3 days ago. The house seemed to echo with memories of Linda. Her coffee mug still sat in the same spot on the kitchen counter where she'd left it 18 months ago. He couldn't bring himself to move it. The Marine chronometer sat beside it, now still frozen at 11:47, the exact moment the drunk driver had run the red light and stolen everything that mattered. Michael made coffee he didn't want and waited for the phone call that would change everything. It came at 9:15. His supervisor's voice was crisp and professional. "Michael, we need to talk. My office, 10:00. The administrative office at Millbrook General felt like a courtroom. His supervisor, Dave Kaufman, sat behind the desk with a folder thick with incident reports. 2 other administrators flanked him, their faces grave and professional. Dave at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Michael, you violated direct protocol by transporting a patient in your personal vehicle. You bypassed our emergency procedures and potentially compromised patient care." Michael listened to the litany of his failures, each word hammering another nail into the coffin of his career. The woman had been right. He was losing his job for saving her life. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent 8 years following every rule, and one moment of human instinct had destroyed it all. "Given the severity of these violations, we have no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately." Dave couldn't quite meet his eyes. The woman to his left, Janet from HR, slid a document across the desk. Final paperwork. A last paycheck. Cobra information for continuing his health insurance, at a premium he couldn't possibly afford. They escorted him to his locker to collect his personal belongings. 8 years of service reduced to a cardboard box and a final paycheck. As he cleaned out his locker, his colleagues watched from a distance, no one quite willing to approach. Whether from awkwardness or institutional caution, he couldn't tell. It didn't matter. He was already a ghost here. The next few days blurred together in a haze of job applications and rejection letters. Michael's reputation in the medical community was tainted now. Word traveled fast in a small town like Millowbrook. His savings account dwindled with each passing day. The mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks, and unemployment benefits would take a month to kick in. He found himself spending hours staring at Linda's coffee mug and the broken chronometer, wondering if this was rock bottom or if there were deeper depths waiting for him. The house felt like a tomb filled with the ghosts of better times and the crushing weight of an uncertain future. Emma would be home soon, and he had no idea how to explain that Daddy's career had ended because he chose compassion over compliance. 3 days after losing his job, Michael encountered her again at the pharmacy. He was picking up Emma's asthma medication, calculating how many refills he could afford without insurance when he saw her. She was standing at the medication aisle, her left arm still in a sling, studying a bottle of prescription pills with intense concentration. The Marine fatigues had been replaced by civilian clothes, jeans and a simple gray t-shirt, but there was no mistaking her. The woman who'd cost him everything stood 15 feet away alive and apparently recovering well. When she turned and saw him, recognition flickered in her eyes. She walked over slowly, each step measured and deliberate. "You're the paramedic," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in his truck. "I heard about what happened and about your job." Michael nodded, not trusting himself to speak without revealing the bitterness he felt. "I'm Sarah Martinez. I owe you my life, and apparently you've paid a hell of a price for it." Sarah asked if they could talk somewhere private. Against his better judgment, Michael found himself agreeing. They walked to Murphy's Diner 2 blocks away, a place where Linda used to order chocolate chip pancakes every Sunday morning. The memories ambushed him as they stepped through the door. Linda laughing as Emma's face disappeared behind a mountain of whipped cream, the three of them squeezed into a booth built for 4, a family complete and unaware of the fragility of their happiness. Sarah moved carefully, favoring her injured shoulder, but her stride was steady and purposeful. She ordered black coffee and apple pie. Michael ordered coffee he didn't want. "You have questions," Sarah said, cutting straight to the heart of it. "I can see them in your eyes. You want to know what I was doing in that parking lot at 6 or so in the morning. You want to know how I knew you'd lose your job." Michael stared at her, unnerved by her perceptiveness. "All of the above," he admitted. Sarah took a sip of her coffee and was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much too young. "I was waiting for someone like you, Michael, someone who would choose to save a life over following rules. I've been watching the hospital staff for 2 weeks, learning their patterns, their personalities. You were the only one who consistently showed up early and stayed late." Michael's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. "You were watching me," Sarah nodded without apology. "I needed to know if you were the right person, if you were someone who understood that some things matter more than protocol." The admission should have been creepy, but something in her tone suggested desperation rather than stalking. "The right person for what?" Michael asked. Sarah's expression darkened. "To help me figure out if I deserve to disappear." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small photograph showing a group of Marines in desert camouflage smiling at the camera. Sarah was in the center, younger and radiating confidence. "That was taken 6 months before everything went wrong." "You were their medic," Michael guessed. Sarah nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "Combat medic, then field surgeon. I was good at keeping people alive in impossible situations. Too good, maybe. When you save someone's life in combat, they feel indebted to you. They start taking risks they shouldn't take, thinking you'll always be there to patch them up." Her voice grew quieter. 3 months ago, that assumption got 6 of them killed. The words hit Michael like a physical blow. He understood survivors' guilt intimately, had lived with it every day since Linda's accident. "It wasn't your fault," he said automatically. Sarah's laugh was bitter and hollow. "That's what everyone keeps telling me, but they weren't there. They didn't see the choice I made." The diner around them buzzed with ordinary life, but Michael and Sarah sat in their bubble of shared trauma. 2 people who understood that good intentions could lead to devastating consequences. "What choice?" Michael asked. Sarah's eyes grew distant, lost in a memory that clearly haunted her. "We were pinned down by sniper fire. 6 wounded Marines in the kill zone, and I could only carry one at a time to safety. I had to choose who got saved first. She took a shaky breath. I chose wrong. By the time I went back for the others, they were gone. Michael reached across the table and covered her hand with his. You saved who you could. That's all anyone can do. Sarah looked at him with something that might have been gratitude. Is that what you tell yourself about Linda? The question hit like a punch to the solar plexus. Michael jerked his hand back as if he'd been burned. How do you know about Linda? Sarah didn't flinch from his anger. I told you, and I've been watching you for 2 weeks. I know you go to Forest Hill Cemetery every Tuesday evening. I know you blame yourself for whatever happened to her. Michael stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled over. You have no right. I have every right, Sarah interrupted, her voice hard as steel, because I recognize a fellow member of the club nobody wants to join. The I should have saved them club. Her words stripped away his defenses, leaving him raw and exposed. He sat back down heavily. She was driving to surprise me at work, Michael said quietly. It was our 3rd wedding anniversary, and she wanted to bring me dinner during my break. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit her car at 60 miles per hour. She died instantly. He stared down at his coffee, watching the light play across his dark surface. I was supposed to work a double shift that night, but I traded with another paramedic because I wanted to take her out to dinner. If I'd stayed at work, she would have come to the hospital instead. She'd still be alive. Sarah nodded as if she'd expected exactly this story. And you've been carrying that guilt for 18 months, punishing yourself by isolating from everyone who might care about you. She didn't phrase it as a question, and Michael didn't treat it as one. The truth of her assessment hung between them undeniable. So what's your solution? Michael asked. Sarah's smile was the first genuine one he'd seen from her. I volunteer at the Veterans Center downtown. They have programs for civilians dealing with trauma too, and they need people with medical training to help with basic health services. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. I think helping other people might remind us that we're still capable of doing good in the world, and maybe eventually we might start believing we deserve to do good for ourselves too. Michael took the card reluctantly. You think volunteering is going to magically fix everything? Sarah shook her head. I think it might be a start. They parted ways with an agreement to meet again in a few days. As he walked home, Michael found himself thinking about Emma for the first time in days without feeling crushing guilt. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe helping others was the first step toward helping himself. 2 days later, Michael found himself standing outside the Millbrook Veterans Center, a converted warehouse in the downtown district. Through the large windows, he could see people moving around inside, some in wheelchairs, others using canes or walkers. The receptionist greeted him warmly. You must be Michael. Sarah said you might stop by. Sarah appeared from a side corridor and wearing jeans and a simple blue sweater. You came, she said, and he could hear surprise in her voice. I wasn't sure you would. The tour revealed a facility that was doing important work on a shoestring budget. There was a counseling center, a job placement office, and a small medical clinic that operated 2 days a week. The center had recently received a grant to implement cutting-edge treatments for PTSD, including a virtual reality system designed to help veterans confront traumatic memories in a controlled environment. This is our new VR therapy suite, Sarah explained, showing him a room with specialized equipment. It's part of a 2025 pilot program. The headsets allow veterans to revisit traumatic scenarios safely, while these biometric monitors track heart rate, blood pressure, and stress levels in real time. The AI adjusts the experience based on their reactions, gradually helping them process the trauma without being overwhelmed. Michael watched as a veteran worked with a therapist, the man's vital signs displayed on monitors, while he navigated a virtual environment. The results have been promising, life-changing for some, Sarah nodded, particularly for those who haven't responded to traditional therapy. We're one of only 5 centers in the country with this technology. They continued to the medical clinic, a small but well-organized space with 2 exam rooms. We see about 40 veterans a week for basic medical needs, Sarah explained. Blood pressure checks, medication consultations, wound care, nothing that requires hospital-level equipment, but stuff that's hard to access if you don't have insurance or transportation. The medical director interviewed Michael in her cramped office surrounded by medical journals and patient files. Dr. Eleanor Hayes was a woman in her early 60s with short silver hair and penetrating blue eyes that missed nothing. Sarah tells me you have 8 years of paramedic experience and recently found yourself between jobs, she said diplomatically. We can't offer much in terms of compensation. This is volunteer work, but we can provide you with a sense of purpose and the chance to help people who really need it. She outlined the position. 2 days a week, basic medical screenings and consultations working alongside Sarah and occasionally other medical volunteers. The pay is terrible, but the job satisfaction is off the charts. When can you start? Michael found himself saying yes. Next week, I suppose. My daughter comes home tomorrow and I'll need to arrange childcare. Dr. Hayes' expression softened. We have an after-school program here. Emma would be welcome to join if she's interested. The offer was almost too good to be true. Michael left feeling something he hadn't experienced in months. Optimism. Emma's homecoming the next day was a revelation. Michael's daughter bounded off the plane with the energy of a child who'd been thoroughly spoiled by her aunt and uncle. She was full of stories about her adventures in Cleveland. I learned to swim underwater. Daddy want me to show you in the bathtub, Michael laughed. Really laughed for the first time in weeks. Maybe we should wait until we can get to the community pool here. Emma's face lit up. Can we go today, please? The pool had been another casualty of Michael's depression. They used to go every weekend when Linda was alive. We'll go this weekend, he promised, and saw hope bloom in his daughter's eyes. That evening, as Emma unpacked her suitcase and chatted about her week away, Michael felt a lightness in his chest that he'd almost forgotten was possible. Maybe Sarah had been right. Maybe helping others could be the first step toward healing himself. The first day at the Veterans Center was both challenging and rewarding. Michael worked with veterans who had served in conflicts from Vietnam to Afghanistan, each with their own physical and psychological wounds. Many were initially wary of a new face, but Sarah's endorsement seemed to carry significant weight. Michael's one of us, she told an older veteran who'd questioned his presence. He understands what it means to carry things you can't put down. Emma thrived in the after-school program, making friends and embracing the diversity of the veteran community. She particularly bonded with an art therapist who helped the children express feelings they couldn't always verbalize. Over the following weeks, Michael settled into a routine that felt sustainable for the first time since Linda's death. He worked at the Veterans Center on Tuesdays and Thursdays, spending his other days job hunting and handling household responsibilities. Sarah became a constant in their lives without either of them formally acknowledging the shift. She would join them for dinner once or twice a week, bringing takeout from various restaurants and staying to help Emma with homework or play board games. The three of them developed an easy familiarity that felt natural rather than forced. Emma clearly adored Sarah, but Sarah never tried to position herself as a replacement for Linda. Instead, she occupied her own unique space in Emma's world, part mentor, part friend, part family. Sarah's teaching me about the different branches of the military, Emma announced one evening. Did you know the Marines are part of the Navy? Michael smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. Sarah knows a lot about the military. She was a very important Marine. One evening in late September, Sarah arrived at their house looking unusually nervous. She'd brought pizza, as was becoming her habit, but she seemed distracted throughout dinner. After Emma went to bed, Sarah and Michael sat on the front porch with cups of coffee. There's something I need to tell you, Sarah said finally, about my family, about who I really am. Michael felt a familiar twist of anxiety in his stomach. Okay, he said carefully. I'm listening. Sarah took a deep breath. My family has money, a lot of money. My father started a medical supply company after he got out of the army, and it's grown into something of an empire. I grew up in a world of private schools and country clubs and charity galas. I joined the Marines partly to escape all that, to prove I could make it on my own merit. She paused, studying his face for reaction. How much money are we talking about? Michael asked. Sarah's laugh was hollow. Enough that I could buy this entire block without blinking. The information was staggering. Michael tried to reconcile the woman sitting beside him with the heiress she was describing. Why are you telling me this? Because my mother is coming to town tomorrow and she's going to try to convince me to come home. She thinks I'm having some sort of breakdown and that my volunteer work is beneath my station in life. She's been calling the center asking questions about my associations. She knows about you and Emma. Michael felt a chill. What kind of questions? The kind that suggests she thinks you might be taking advantage of me financially. The implication was clear and insulting. Michael stood up abruptly, anger flaring in his chest. I had no idea about your money. I never asked you for anything. Sarah stood too, reaching for his arm. I know that I know, but my mother sees a struggling single father befriending a wealthy woman and draws her own conclusions. They stood in uncomfortable silence as the reality of their situation settled between them. I should go, Sarah said finally. Give you time to process this. The next morning brought Michael's first encounter with Sarah's mother, and it was every bit as uncomfortable as he'd anticipated. She arrived at his house at 900 sharp, driving a black Mercedes. She was an elegant woman in her early 60s, impeccably dressed and radiating confidence. Mr. Thompson, she said by way of greeting, I think we need to have a conversation about your relationship with my daughter. Michael invited her in, though every instinct told him this was a mistake. She surveyed his modest living room with barely concealed disdain. Sarah has always been drawn to strays, she said without preamble. Wounded animals' loss causes people who need fixing. It's a compulsion that's gotten her into trouble before. Michael bristled at being categorized as a stray. Your daughter is a remarkable woman who's been helping people heal, including me. Her smile was as cold as winter steel. How much has she given you, Mr. Thompson? Money for rent, groceries, perhaps help with childcare expenses? She hasn't given me anything, Michael said firmly. We volunteered together at the Veterans Center. That's it. She reached into her purse and pulled out a leather checkbook. I'm prepared to offer you $50,000 to end your association with my daughter. Clean break, no contact, no explanations. The offer was breathtaking in its insulting indirectness. Mrs. Martinez, I think you misunderstand the nature of my relationship with your daughter. We're friends. She's been helping me work through some difficult times, and I hope I've been able to do the same for her. Her expression suggested she found this explanation naive. Mr. Thompson, you're unemployed, recently widowed, and raising a child alone. Sarah is wealthy, traumatized, and looking for a cause to champion. This isn't friendship. It's codependency. Before Michael could respond, Emma came downstairs. She stopped short when she saw the strange woman. Who's that daddy? I'm Mrs. Martinez, sweetheart. I'm Sarah's mother. Emma's face lit up immediately. You're Sarah's mom. She's the best. She's teaching me how to play chess, and she knows all about the Marines, and she helps me with my math homework. Mrs. Martinez's expression softened slightly in the face of Emma's enthusiasm, but the warmth didn't reach her eyes. It's nice to meet you, Emma. Your father and I are having a grown-up conversation right now. Perhaps you could play outside for a little while. After Emma went outside, Mrs. Martinez turned her attention back to Michael with renewed intensity. I can see that you care about your daughter's future. Private school, college, tuition, extracurricular activities. These things add up quickly. The $50,000 I mentioned earlier could go a long way. Michael felt sick. You're trying to buy me off with my daughter's future. Her expression remained impassive. I'm trying to ensure that everyone gets what they need. Sarah needs professional psychiatric treatment, not amateur therapy from someone who's struggling with his own issues. Emma needs educational opportunities that your current financial situation can't provide. Each word was delivered with surgical precision. What makes you think Sarah's generosity is guilt-driven? He asked. Her smile was triumphant. Because I know my daughter, Mr. Thompson, and I know that she sees you as another casualty to save another way to atone for the people she couldn't save in Afghanistan. The conversation was interrupted by Sarah's arrival. She walked into the house without knocking, but stopped short when she saw her mother. Mother, I wasn't expecting you until this afternoon. Sarah's mother stood gracefully. I thought it would be better to speak with Mr. Thompson privately first. We've had a very illuminating conversation. Sarah looked at Michael, her eyes searching his face. I see, and what conclusions did you reach? Her mother gathered her purse and checkbook. I think Mr. Thompson understands the situation more clearly now. Don't you, Mr. Thompson? Michael looked between the two women. I understand that you love your daughter and want what's best for her, but I think Sarah is capable of making her own decisions about her life and relationships. Her mother's expression suggested disappointment. We'll see. Dinner tonight at 7 Dorm, the Grand View. We have a lot to discuss. After she left, the house felt different, tainted by her presence. Sarah and Michael stood in awkward silence. Finally, Sarah spoke. What did she offer you? The question was asked with resignation rather than anger. 50,000 to disappear from your life, Michael replied honestly. Sarah closed her eyes. Did you consider it? For about 10 seconds, he admitted. But then I realized that taking money from your mother would prove everything she believes about me. Later that evening, while Sarah endured dinner with her mother, Michael found himself walking through Forest Hill Cemetery for the first time in weeks. He sat down on the grass beside Linda's grave and tried to sort through the chaos of emotions. I think I might be falling in love with someone, he said to the headstone. She's complicated and damaged and comes with more baggage than I know how to handle, but she makes me want to be better than I am. He paused, listening to the evening sounds around him. I don't know if you'd approve of her, Linda. She's nothing like you. Where you are gentle and patient, she's direct and challenging. But she's helping me remember who I used to be before the accident broke me. When he returned home, he found Sarah sitting on his front porch steps. How did it go? He asked. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. She's offered to pay for private psychiatric treatment at a facility in Switzerland. 6 months of intensive therapy. She's also offered to establish a college fund for Emma. All I have to do is agree to cut contact with you. This offer was staggering in its generosity and devastating in its implications. What did you tell her? Michael asked quietly. I told her I needed time to think about it. Sarah stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. She's not wrong about everything, Michael. I am damaged. I do have a history of trying to fix people instead of fixing myself, and maybe my attraction to you is partly about guilt and the need to save someone. The admission was like a physical blow. And maybe my attraction to you is partly about having someone who understands loss and doesn't expect me to be over it, Michael replied. That doesn't make what we have less real. Sarah turned back to him, tears visible in her eyes. But what if she's right? What if I'm just using you to avoid dealing with my own problems? Michael stood and walked over to her, taking her hands in his. Then we figure it out together. We get help if we need it. We take things slow if we need to. But we don't let fear destroy something that's been good for both of us. Sarah leaned against him. She wants an answer by tomorrow morning. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Michael was making breakfast when Emma announced that there was a police car in their driveway. A uniformed officer was holding an official-looking document. Michael Thompson, yes. You're being served with a restraining order. You're to have no contact with Sarah Martinez, effective immediately. Michael stared at the restraining order in his hands, the legal language swimming before his eyes. Phrases jumped out at him. No contact whatsoever. Minimum distance of 500 feet. Violation punishable by imprisonment. The allegations were vague but damning inappropriate behavior. Unwanted advances. Attempts to exploit the victim's generosity. This is insane. I haven't threatened anyone, Michael said, his voice hollow with disbelief. The officer shrugged sympathetically. It's a temporary order, sir. You'll have a chance to contest it in court next week. He handed Michael a card with the court date. Until then, I'd advise you to follow it to the letter. These things can get complicated fast. As the police car pulled away, Michael stood in the doorway, the morning sunlight suddenly feeling cold on his skin. Emma appeared beside him, her small face pinched with concern. Daddy, why was there a police car? Are you in trouble? Michael crouched down to her level, trying to find words that wouldn't frighten her. No, sweetheart. There's just a misunderstanding between grown-ups. Nothing for you to worry about. Emma's eyes, so much like Linda's, searched his face with a wisdom beyond her years. Is it about Sarah? Is that why she didn't come for breakfast like she promised? The innocent question twisted something in Michael's chest. He'd forgotten that Sarah had promised to bring breakfast this morning. Emma had been looking forward to it, had even made a special drawing to show her. Sarah and I have a problem right now, and we might not be able to see each other for a while. Emma's face fell. Did you have a fight? No, not a fight. Sarah's mother doesn't think it's good for Sarah to spend time with us right now. She's worried that Sarah might get hurt. Emma processed this with the seriousness of a child who'd learned that the adult world was unpredictable. But we would never hurt Sarah. We love her. The simple statement cut straight to the heart of the situation. I know, sweetheart, and I think Sarah knows that too. Inside, Michael spread the restraining order on the kitchen table, reading every word carefully. The order was comprehensive and devastating. He was prohibited from contacting Sarah in any way, from approaching within 500 feet of her residence or workplace, and from attempting to communicate with her through third parties. The Veterans Center was specifically mentioned as a place he was banned from entering. The immediate implications were staggering. Michael's volunteer work at the center was finished cutting off not only his sense of purpose, but also Emma's after-school program. Worse, he had no way to contact Sarah to understand what was happening. For all he knew, she had requested the restraining order herself, finally accepting her mother's assessment of their relationship. He picked up his phone, tempted to call Sarah, then remembered that would violate the order. He tried calling the Veterans Center instead, asking to speak with Dr. Hayes, but the receptionist sounded uncomfortable when he identified himself. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, but I've been instructed not to put through any calls from you. Dr. Hayes is aware of the situation." So the word had already spread. Michael thanked her quietly and hung up the isolation, closing in around him like a physical presence. That afternoon, Michael drove Emma to school, trying to maintain a facade of normalcy. "What about after school?" she asked as she climbed out of the car. "I'm supposed to go to the Veterans Center." "Not today, honey. I'll pick you up and take you to the library instead. We'll figure out a more permanent solution soon." Emma's disappointed nod broke his heart. The Veterans Center had become an important part of her routine, a place where she felt connected to a community larger than just the two of them. As he drove away, Michael caught sight of another parent watching him from beside her car. The woman quickly looked away when their eyes met, but the damage was done. Word of the restraining order had clearly spread beyond the medical community. In a town the size of Millbrook, gossip traveled at the speed of light. The next few days passed in a blur of job applications and rejection letters. Word of the restraining order had spread through Millbrook's medical community, making Michael radioactive to potential employers. No one wanted to hire a paramedic with a restraining order, regardless of the circumstances. Michael found himself considering Sarah's mother's original offer to leave town. At least then Emma could have some stability, and he could start fresh somewhere else. The irony wasn't lost on him that Mrs. Martinez had achieved her objective without having to pay a cent. On Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after the restraining order had been served, Michael was surprised by a knock at his door. He opened it to find Dr. Eleanor Hayes from the Veterans Center standing on his porch. "I suppose you've heard about the restraining order," Michael said. She nodded grimly. "That's why I'm here. We need to talk." Over coffee in his kitchen, she explained that she'd spent the week investigating the allegations against Michael. "I've spoken with every veteran you treated, every staff member you worked with. Without exception, they describe you as professional, compassionate, and appropriate." She paused. "I've also spoken with Sarah." Michael's heart rate quickened. How was she devastated? She had no idea her mother was planning to file the restraining order. "She's been trying to contact you for days, not knowing that doing so would violate the legal restrictions." She reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope. "She asked me to give you this. I'm taking a risk by delivering it, but after reviewing the situation, I believe this restraining order is a gross misuse of the legal system." Michael took the envelope with trembling hands. "Is she okay?" "She's safe. Her mother has arranged for her to receive treatment at a private facility, but Sarah is an adult who can make her own decisions." Dr. Hayes stood up. "The hearing to contest the restraining order is on Monday. Sarah will be there with her own attorney. I'll be testifying as a character witness for you both." After she left, Michael sat at his kitchen table, staring at the envelope for nearly an hour before opening it. Sarah's letter was 3 pages long, but he could see tear stains on some of the pages. "Michael, I need you to know that I had nothing to do with this restraining order. My mother filed it without my knowledge or consent, using her connections with a judge who owed her a favor. By the time I found out, it was already being served. I've retained my own attorney and am taking legal action to have the order dismissed. I'm also in the process of separating my finances from my family's control. I refuse to let my mother destroy the best thing that's happened to me since I came home from Afghanistan. But I understand if you decide this is too much drama for you and Emma to handle. Please know that everything that happened between us was real. You and Emma brought light back into my life when I thought all the lights had gone out forever. Whatever happens next, I will always be grateful for that. I hope to see you in court on Monday. My attorney believes we have a strong case for having the restraining order dismissed. Dr. Hayes has been incredible rallying support from everyone at the center. Tell Emma I miss her chess playing and her drawings. Tell her this isn't her fault and that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt the people they care about most. With hope, Sarah Michael read the letter 3 times, relief and determination building, with each reading. Sarah hadn't betrayed him. She was fighting for them just as he would fight for her. That evening, he sat Emma down and carefully explained what was happening in terms she could understand. Sarah didn't want to stay away from us. Her mom made a mistake and used the law to keep us apart. But we're going to fix it on Monday. Emma's face brightened. So Sarah can come back. I hope so, sweetie. We're going to do everything we can to make that happen. Emma thought for a moment. Can I make her a card to show her I miss her? That's a wonderful idea. We'll make sure she gets it. The weekend crawled by with excruciating slowness. Michael prepared for the hearing with the help of a pro bono attorney that Dr. Hayes had arranged. He gathered character references, prepared his testimony, and tried to anticipate what Mrs. Martinez's attorney might ask. On Sunday night, as he tucked Emma into bed, she handed him a carefully folded piece of paper. It's for Sarah, for luck tomorrow. Michael unfolded it to find a crayon drawing of 3 figures holding hands, Michael, Emma, and Sarah, standing in front of what appeared to be the Veterans Center. Above them, written in Emma's careful printing, "Our family isn't complete without you." This is beautiful, Emma. I'm sure Sarah will love it. Will you tell me right away if the judge says she can come back? The very minute I know. Monday morning dawned clear and cold. Michael dropped Emma at school with a promise to pick her up with good news, then drove to the courthouse, his stomach tight with anxiety. His attorney, Mark Daniels, met him on the steps. Ready for this? Michael nodded. More than ready. The courtroom was smaller than he'd expected, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that buzzed faintly overhead. Mrs. Martinez sat at one table with her attorney, an expensively dressed man with a perpetual frown. Sarah sat at another table with a young woman who radiated competence and determination. Dr. Hayes and several people from the Veterans Center filled the rows behind them. When Sarah saw Michael, their eyes met across the room. She offered a small, nervous smile that he returned. She looked thinner than he remembered, with dark circles under her eyes, but her gaze was steady and resolute. Mrs. Martinez's attorney presented their case, first painting Michael as an unstable, financially desperate man who had developed an unhealthy fixation on Sarah. He emphasized Michael's recent job loss, his financial struggles, and what he called a pattern of impulsive behavior, citing the incident that had cost Michael his job at the hospital. Ms. Martinez is a vulnerable young woman suffering from PTSD, the attorney concluded. She needs protection from those who would exploit her condition and her generosity. Sarah's attorney, Jessica Kim, began her presentation with a direct attack on the legitimacy of the restraining order itself. Your Honor, my client never requested this restraining order. It was filed without her knowledge by her mother, Elaine Martinez, who misrepresented herself as acting on Sarah's behalf. She presented affidavits from the Veterans Center staff testifying to the appropriate and therapeutic nature of Michael and Sarah's relationship. Hayes testified about Sarah's progress since beginning work at the center and her positive interactions with Michael and Emma. The turning point came when Sarah herself took the stand. She spoke clearly and with conviction about her relationship with Michael and Emma, about how they had helped her begin to heal from her combat experiences, and about her mother's history of controlling behavior. My mother has always tried to manage my life according to her vision of what's best for me, Sarah explained. When I joined the Marines instead of attending the Ivy League college she'd chosen, she cut off communication for 2 years. When I came home from Afghanistan with PTSD, she tried to hide me away at a private facility rather than let anyone see that her daughter was struggling. And now that I've found connection and purpose with Michael and Emma, she's using the legal system to sever that connection. Martinez's attorney cross-examined Sarah aggressively, suggesting that her PTSD had impaired her judgment and that she was being manipulated by Michael. Sarah remained composed, answering each question thoughtfully. Mr. Thompson has never asked me for money or favors, she stated firmly. He has respected my boundaries and supported my recovery in ways that my own family has not. The only person attempting to control me is my mother. When Michael took the stand, he spoke honestly about meeting Sarah, about their developing friendship, and about Mrs. Martinez's offer of $50,000 to end his association with Sarah. I declined because what Sarah brought to our lives, to my daughter's life, was worth far more than money. She helped us begin to heal from the loss of my wife. She gave Emma a role model of strength and resilience, and she reminded me that it's possible to find purpose even after devastating loss. By the time the judge called a recess to consider his decision, Michael felt cautiously optimistic. The evidence against the restraining order was substantial, and Mrs. Martinez's case seemed to be built primarily on insinuation rather than fact. When the judge returned, his expression was severe as he addressed Mrs. Martinez directly. I find the circumstances under which this restraining order was obtained to be deeply troubling. It appears that you deliberately misrepresented your daughter's wishes and manipulated the legal system for personal ends. He turned to Michael. Mr. Thompson, the temporary restraining order is hereby dismissed. The court apologizes for any hardship this situation may have caused you. The relief that flooded through Michael was so intense it made him dizzy. Across the room, Sarah's eyes shone with tears as she smiled at him. Her attorney was already gathering papers, speaking quietly but intensely to Sarah. As they filed out of the courtroom, Michael and Sarah made eye contact for the first time in 3 weeks. She looked thinner and more tired than he remembered, but her smile was genuine and full of relief. They met for coffee an hour later at Murphy's Diner, the same place where they'd first begun to understand each other's pain. "I'm sorry," Sarah said before Michael had even sat down. "I'm sorry my mother put you through this." Michael reached across the table and took her hand. "It's not your fault. You didn't choose to have a mother who thinks she can control people with money and legal intimidation." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "So what happens now? The restraining order is gone, but the problems that caused it are still there." Michael had been thinking about this question for weeks. "We take it one day at a time. We're honest with each other about the challenges, and we don't let other people's opinions define what we have." Sarah nodded slowly. "I've been working with a therapist who specializes in trauma and family dynamics. She thinks I need to establish firmer boundaries with my mother and learn to trust my own judgment about relationships." Michael smiled. "That sounds like a good start. I've been thinking about going back to school, maybe getting my nursing degree. I can't go back to being a paramedic in this town, but I could still help people." The conversation was practical and hopeful, focused on building a foundation for whatever came next. They agreed that Sarah would come for dinner that evening, giving her a chance to reunite with Emma. Emma's reaction to Sarah's return was pure joy, tempered by 8-year-old wariness. "Are you going to stay this time?" she asked Sarah directly. "I don't want Daddy to be sad again if you have to go away." Sarah knelt down to Emma's eye level. "I can't promise that nothing will ever separate us again," she said honestly. "But I can promise that if I ever have to go away, it won't be because I don't care about you and your daddy." Emma considered this answer carefully. "Are you fixing your problems now?" Sarah nodded. "I'm working on it every day, just like your daddy is working on his problems." Emma seemed satisfied. "Okay, but can you teach me more friendship bracelet patterns? I learned some at school, but they're too easy." Sarah laughed, the tension broken. "Absolutely. I know at least 20 patterns we can try." The center welcomed them back with professional warmth and personal relief. Michael settled back into the rhythm of patient care with renewed appreciation. Sarah threw herself into her counseling work with renewed focus. Emma resumed her after-school activities with the enthusiasm of a child who'd learned not to take stability for granted. 3 months later, Michael graduated from his nursing program with honors and a job offer from St. Mary's Hospital, the same hospital where he'd brought Sarah the morning that started everything. They offered him a position in their emergency department, impressed by his experience and the glowing recommendations from Dr. Hayes and the Veterans Center staff. Emma had adjusted well to their new routine, which included Sarah's presence in their lives on a more permanent basis. She'd moved into her own apartment across town, maintaining her independence while becoming an integral part of their daily life. They developed a rhythm that worked for all of them: family dinners twice a week, weekend activities, and quiet evenings when Emma did homework, while the adults planned their future together. It wasn't the traditional nuclear family that Michael had once imagined, but it was something uniquely theirs, built on mutual respect and shared experience rather than conventional expectations. The transformation hadn't been without its challenges, but time and consistency had gradually worn down most of the opposition. Even some of the hospital staff who had initially shunned Michael had come around, especially after the truth about the restraining order became public knowledge. On a warm evening in late spring, nearly a year after that morning in the hospital parking lot, Michael found himself sitting on his front porch with Sarah and Emma, watching the neighborhood kids play in the fading daylight. Emma was showing Sarah how to play a complicated clapping game, their laughter mixing with the sounds of suburban evening. Michael thought about Linda's broken chronometer, which now sat on his dresser alongside a new watch Sarah had given him. The old watch had never been repaired, but it no longer felt like a symbol of everything that had stopped working in his life. Instead, it had become a reminder that some things were worth preserving, even when they were broken, and that healing didn't always mean returning to an original state. Sometimes it meant accepting damage and finding new ways to function, new purposes that incorporated both the scars and the strength that came from surviving them. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked, noticing his contemplative mood. Michael smiled, watching Emma demonstrate the clapping game with intense concentration. "I'm thinking about how strange life is, how the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes if you're willing to stay open to possibilities." Sarah followed his gaze to Emma. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd followed protocol that morning?" Michael considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But then I remember that following all the rules for 8 years didn't protect me from losing everything that mattered. Maybe breaking the rules was exactly what I needed to do to find something worth keeping." Sarah leaned against his shoulder, solid and warm and real. "Some things can't be fixed," she said, echoing the words she'd spoken that first morning. "But some things don't need to be fixed. They just need to be accepted and loved as they are." Michael wrapped his arm around her, thinking about broken watches and healed hearts and the unexpected ways that love could grow in the spaces between loss and hope. The future stretched out before them, uncertain but no longer empty, filled with the possibility of ordinary miracles and the quiet satisfaction of choosing each other again and again, one day at a time. 2 years after the morning Michael found Sarah bleeding in the hospital parking lot, they stood together in another parking lot, this one outside Millbrook Community Center. The building had been transformed with flags and banners announcing the grand opening of the Millbrook Veterans Resource Hub, an expanded facility that incorporated the old Veterans Center and added new services, including a state-of-the-art PTSD treatment wing featuring the virtual reality therapy that had proven so successful. Sarah, now the medical director of the facility, straightened Michael's tie as they prepared to enter. "Nervous?" she asked. Michael nodded. "A little. I've never given a speech to this many people before." Inside the community center auditorium was filled to capacity. Veterans and their families, medical professionals, and community members had gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. In the front row, Emma sat with Michael's sister and her husband, who had flown in for the occasion. At 10 years old now, Emma had grown taller, her face losing some of its childish roundness, but her eyes still held the same bright curiosity. Sarah took the podium first, her confidence evident as she addressed the crowd. 2 years ago, the Millbrook Veterans Center was a small operation running on passion and shoestring budgets. Today, thanks to the federal grant we received, we're able to expand our service to reach more veterans and their families, with cutting-edge treatments for PTSD and other combat-related injuries. She went on to explain the new biometric monitoring system that would allow for personalized treatment plans, the expanded counseling services, and the family support programs. "But technology alone doesn't heal people," she concluded. "People heal people." And that's why I'm so proud to introduce our new Director of Community Outreach, a man whose compassion and willingness to put people before protocol has saved more lives than he knows, Michael Thompson. As Michael stepped up to the podium, the applause was warm and genuine. He still found it strange to be applauded rather than criticized for the action that had cost him his paramedic job, but the world had a funny way of coming full circle. "Thank you, Dr. Martinez," he said, smiling at the formality that still felt new. Sarah had completed her psychiatric recertification 6 months ago, adding to her surgical credentials. 2 years ago, I made a split-second decision that cost me my job but gave me something far more valuable, a chance to be part of building something that truly matters. He spoke about the importance of community support for veterans, about how isolation worsened trauma, while connection fostered healing. What we're doing here isn't just treating symptoms. We're rebuilding lives, including my own. As he spoke, his gaze found Emma in the front row, her face glowing with pride. Beside her sat Dr. Hayes, now semi-retired, but still deeply involved with the center. And at the very back of the room, almost hidden in the shadows, stood an elegant, older woman with silver-streaked, dark hair. Mrs. Martinez had come after all, despite saying she wouldn't attend. The sight of her gave Michael pause, but only for a moment. One of the most important lessons I've learned in the past 2 years is that healing is rarely a straight line. It's a messy, complicated process that involves setbacks and unexpected allies. But with the right support, even the deepest wounds can become sources of strength. After the ceremony, as people mingled over refreshments, Mrs. Martinez approached Michael. They hadn't spoken since the courtroom 2 years ago, though Sarah had cautiously rebuilt a limited relationship with her mother over the past year. "That was an impressive speech, Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Thank you for coming." Michael replied, equally careful. "It means a lot to Sarah." Mrs. Martinez nodded, her gaze moving to where Sarah stood across the room, surrounded by colleagues and supporters. "She's doing remarkable work here. Her father would have been proud." The mention of Sarah's father, who had passed away last year without ever reconciling with his daughter, hung between them like a weight. "I think so too," Michael said gently. "I was wrong about you," Mrs. Martinez said suddenly, the words clearly difficult for her. "And I was wrong about what Sarah needed. I'm not good at admitting mistakes, but I'm trying to learn." Before Michael could respond, Emma appeared at his side, her natural social grace saving them from the awkward moment. "Grandma Elaine, you came. Did you see the art therapy room I helped paint the mural?" The term Grandma Elaine was something Emma had started using in recent months, as Mrs. Martinez had cautiously become part of their extended family circle. The older woman's face softened as she looked at Emma. "I didn't see it yet. Perhaps you could show me." As Emma led Mrs. Martinez away, chattering about the mural and her contributions to it, Sarah joined Michael. "Was that civil conversation I witnessed between you and my mother?" Michael smiled. "Surprisingly, yes. She actually admitted she was wrong about me." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "That's practically a miracle. My mother has admitted being wrong exactly 3 times in her entire life, and 2 of those were to me in the past year." They watched as Emma proudly showed Mrs. Martinez around the facility, the older woman listening with what appeared to be genuine interest. "She's trying," Sarah said quietly. "It's not perfect, but it's something." Michael took Sarah's hand, feeling the simple gold band on her finger. Their courthouse wedding 3 months ago had been small and private. Just the 2 of them, Emma, Mom, and a few close friends from the center. Mrs. Martinez had been invited but had sent an elaborate gift instead of attending. It had been a compromise, like so many aspects of their blended lives. "Not perfect, but something real," Michael agreed. "Kind of like us." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Exactly like us." Later that evening, after the excitement had died down and Emma was in bed, Michael and Sarah sat on the front porch of what was now their shared home. The spring air was warm, scented with lilacs from the bush Linda had planted years ago. Sarah had been the one to insist they keep the house on Maple Street, understanding that it held important memories for both Michael and Emma. "I got a call from the Department of Veterans Affairs today," Sarah said, breaking the comfortable silence. "They want to use our VR therapy program as a model for VA hospitals nationwide. They're sending a team next month to see it in action." Michael smiled. "That's incredible. You've worked so hard to make this happen." "We've worked hard," Sarah corrected him. "This is as much your achievement as mine." Michael shook his head. "I just volunteer a few days a week. You're the one with the medical credentials and the vision." Sarah turned to face him fully. "That's not true, and you know it. Your approach to patient care, your emphasis on treating the whole person, not just the symptoms, that's what makes our program different. The veterans trust you because you see them as people, not just cases." She paused, then added, "Besides, who was it that suggested adapting the VR therapy for families to help them understand what their loved ones are experiencing? That was all you, and it's become one of our most successful components." Michael acknowledged her point with a nod. They had indeed built the program together, each contributing their unique perspective and skills. It was one of the things he loved most about their partnership, the way they complemented each other professionally as well as personally. I got a call today too, he said, from Millbrook General. Sarah looked surprised. The hospital that fired you, what did they want? They're under new management, and they want to establish a liaison with our center. Apparently, they've been impressed with our outcomes and want to refer patients to us. He couldn't help the small smile of vindication. They asked specifically for me to coordinate the program. Sarah laughed. Life really does come full circle, doesn't it? Are you going to do it? Michael nodded. I think so. It feels right somehow, closing that chapter properly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the neighborhood settle into night. A dog barked in the distance, and somewhere a car door slammed. Ordinary sounds of an ordinary evening, precious in their mundanity. I've been thinking about what you said at the ceremony today, Sarah said eventually, about healing not being a straight line. I think that's true of building a life together too. Michael took her hand. Definitely. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But always moving forward overall, Sarah added, even on the hard days. And there had been hard days. Days when Sarah's PTSD flared up, triggered by a sudden loud noise or a particular smell. Days when Michael found himself caught in the undertow of grief, missing Linda, with an intensity that took his breath away. Days when Emma struggled to navigate the complex emotional landscape of loving her mother's memory while making room for Sarah in her heart. But there had also been days of unexpected joy. Emma's first swim meet where she'd won a ribbon and they'd all gone out for ice cream to celebrate. The day Sarah had received the grant funding for the expansion, dancing around the living room with Emma in unrestrained excitement. Quiet evenings like this one where the simple fact of being together felt like enough. Do you ever think about having more kids? Sarah asked suddenly, her voice casual but her grip on his hand tightening slightly. The question caught Michael off guard. They'd talked about the future in general terms, but not specifically about expanding their family. Sometimes, he admitted. Do you, Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on the darkening street. I never thought I would. After Afghanistan, I couldn't imagine bringing a child into a world that contained so much pain. But now, she trailed off, then turned to look at him. Now I can see the possibility. Not to replace what we've lost, but to add to what we've found. Michael felt something expand in his chest. Hope and fear and love all mingled together. Emma would love being a big sister. She'd be amazing at it, Sarah agreed. Then more hesitantly, would it feel like betraying Linda? It was a question Michael had asked himself many times over the past year. No, he said with certainty. Linda would want Emma to have siblings. She was an only child and always said it was lonely. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder. We don't have to decide anything now. It's just something I've been thinking about. Me too, Michael admitted. And for what it's worth, I think you'd be an incredible mother. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I'm scared, she finally said. What if I can't protect them? What if I make the wrong choice again? The echo of her words from that first conversation in the diner about choosing which wounded Marine to save first hung between them. Michael turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. You know what I've learned from raising Emma, parents always make wrong choices. We're human. The trick isn't to be perfect. It's to be present, to show up every day and try again. Sarah's smile was small but genuine. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, Michael said, thinking of Linda, of Emma, of Sarah herself. Several, actually. The porch light cast a warm glow around them, creating a small circle of illumination in the growing darkness. Inside the house, Emma slept peacefully, surrounded by the drawings and books and small treasures that made up her 10-year-old world. And somewhere in the universe, Michael liked to think Linda was watching over them all, approving of the family they were building from the broken pieces of their separate lives. One day at a time, Sarah said, echoing the phrase that had become something of a mantra for them both. One day at a time, Michael agreed, pulling her closer as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. 6 months had passed since the restraining order was dismissed. Life had settled into a new normal that felt both precarious and precious. Michael had completed his nursing program and now worked full-time at St. Mary's, while Sarah continued to expand the Veterans Center's programs with a focus on innovative PTSD treatments. Emma had adjusted to the new rhythm of their lives, thriving in school and spending afternoons at the center where she'd become something of a mascot to the veterans. On a crisp October morning, Michael arrived at work to find an urgent message waiting for him. The hospital administrator wanted to see him immediately. Michael's stomach tightened with familiar anxiety. Urgent meetings with administrators had never brought good news in his experience. Dr. Patricia Winters, the chief medical officer at St. Mary's, greeted him with uncharacteristic formality. "Michael, please close the door and have a seat." The office felt suddenly airless. "Is there a problem with my work?" Michael asked, his mind racing through recent cases, searching for mistakes. Dr. Winters sighed, removing her glasses. "Not with your work, no. Your performance has been exemplary." She hesitated, then pushed a folder across her desk. "This arrived yesterday. I wanted to speak with you before it became official." Michael opened the folder to find a formal complaint filed against him by Elaine Martinez, Sarah's mother. The document alleged professional misconduct, claiming that Michael had accessed Sarah's medical records without authorization during her initial treatment at St. Mary's. "This is absurd," Michael said, his voice tight. "I didn't have access to medical records when Sarah was treated here. I wasn't an employee." "I know," Dr. Winter said, "and our records show no unauthorized access during that period. But Mrs. Martinez has considerable influence with our board of directors. She's demanding a formal investigation." Michael felt a cold weight settling in his chest. "What does this mean for my position here? For now, nothing changes, but I need to be transparent. If this escalates, hospital policy would require us to place you on administrative leave pending investigation." Michael nodded mechanically. "I understand." "For what it's worth," De Winters added, "I think this is obviously personal rather than professional. But we have to follow procedure." As Michael left the office, his phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Need to talk. Something's happened. Meet for lunch." They met at a small cafe 2 blocks from the hospital, away from their usual haunts. Sarah was already waiting, her face drawn with tension. She stood when she saw him, embracing him tightly before they sat down. "My mother's launched another attack," she said without preamble. "She's filed a formal complaint against the Veterans Center, alleging misappropriation of funds and unauthorized treatment practices." Michael's stomach dropped. "She filed one against me too, claiming I accessed your medical records illegally." Sarah closed her eyes briefly, pain etched across her features. "I'm sorry, I thought we were past this. She's been so quiet these past months, I actually believed she'd accepted our relationship." "What triggered this?" Michael asked. "Did something happen?" Sarah hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "This came yesterday. It's from my father's attorney." Michael took the envelope, noting the letterhead of a prestigious law firm. Inside was a formal letter informing Sarah that her father, Thomas Martinez, had revised his will. He had established a substantial trust in Sarah's name, separate from the family's main holdings and explicitly protected from any interference by her mother. "He's dying," Sarah said quietly. "Pancreatic cancer stage 4. The doctors give him 3 months at most." Michael reached across the table, taking her hand. "I'm sorry, Sarah." She nodded, blinking back tears. "We haven't spoken in years." "Not really, but this," she gestured at the letter, "this feels like his way of apologizing, of saying he was wrong to let my mother control everything." "And your mother knows about this?" "Yes, the attorney copied her on all correspondence. I think that's what triggered this new assault. She's always controlled the family, money used it as leverage. Now my father's giving me financial independence, and she's lashing out." Michael studied Sarah's face, noting the conflict in her eyes. "Do you want to see him? Your father?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "Part of me says it's too late, that he had years to stand up to her and never did. But another part," she trailed off, "wants closure." Michael finished for her. Sarah nodded. "He's in New York at Memorial Sloan Kettering. The best oncologist, the best care money can buy. Not that it matters at this stage." They discussed their options, the immediate threats, and how to protect themselves and the center from Mrs. Martinez's accusations. By the time they parted, they had the beginnings of a plan. Sarah would consult the center's legal team, while Michael would gather documentation proving he never had access to her medical records. What neither of them could know was that Elaine Martinez was just beginning her campaign. 3 days later, Michael received a call from Emma's school. The principal wanted to see him immediately. When he arrived, he found Emma waiting in the outer office, her face tear-streaked and defiant. "What happened?" he asked, crouching beside her chair. Emma wiped her nose with her sleeve. "I punched Tyler Miller in the nose." Michael blinked in surprise. Emma had never been violent. "Why would you do that?" "He said you were a criminal and that Sarah was crazy from the war, and that's why you got fired from your last job." Emma's chin trembled. "He said his mom told him you both were dangerous and shouldn't be around kids." Michael felt as if he'd been punched himself. "Emma, no matter what anyone says, violence isn't the answer." "I know," she mumbled, "but he wouldn't stop." The principal, Mrs. Gonzalez, invited them into her office. She was sympathetic but firm. Fighting violated school policy, and Emma would need to serve detention. But she was also concerned about the source of the conflict. "Several parents have approached me with concerns," she said carefully, "about your relationship with Ms. Martinez. There seem to be rumors circulating in the community." "What kind of rumors?" Michael asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. "That there was a restraining order. That Ms. Martinez suffers from violent episodes related to PTSD. That the Veterans Center is using experimental treatments without proper oversight." Mrs. Gonzalez looked uncomfortable. "I don't put stock in gossip, Mr. Thompson, but when it affects students, I have to address it." Michael explained the situation as succinctly as possible. The dismissed restraining order, Mrs. Martinez's opposition to their relationship, the important work they were doing at the center. Mrs. Gonzalez listened attentively, her expression softening. "Thank you for being candid. I'll address the bullying issue with Tyler and his parents. But you should know, these rumors are spreading beyond the school. Someone's being very deliberate about this." That evening, Michael and Sarah sat at the kitchen table after Emma had gone to bed, comparing notes on what was quickly becoming a coordinated attack. Sarah had discovered that her mother had filed formal complaints with the Medical Licensing Board, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and the State Attorney General's office. The accusations ranged from ethical violations to financial impropriety to practicing medicine without proper authorization. "She's trying to destroy everything we've built," Sarah said, her voice hollow. "The center, your career, our relationship, all of it." Michael reached for her hand. "We'll fight this. We have the truth on our side." "Ishan." Sarah squeezed his hand, but her eyes were troubled. "Truth doesn't always win, Michael. Not against money and influence." The next morning brought fresh complications. Michael arrived at St. Mary's to find Dr. Winters waiting for him with a grave expression. "I'm sorry, Michael. The board has placed you on administrative leave pending investigation. Mrs. Martinez escalated her complaint directly to them." Michael surrendered his hospital ID badge, feeling a terrible sense of déjà vu. Once again, he was being pushed out of a job he loved because of circumstances beyond his control. Dr. Winters assured him it was temporary, that she was fighting for him, but the weight of uncertainty settled heavily on his shoulders. At home, he found 3 messages on the answering machine, all from reporters seeking comment on the developing situation at the Veterans Center. When he tried calling Sarah, her phone went straight to voicemail. Growing increasingly concerned, he drove to the center only to find a local news van parked outside and a reporter approaching veterans as they entered the building. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The receptionist looked harried, fielding constant phone calls. "Thank goodness you're here," she said when she saw Michael. "Dr. Martinez is in her office with the board members. It's not good." Michael found Sarah surrounded by the center's board of directors, her face pale but composed as she methodically addressed each accusation. When she saw Michael, relief flickered briefly in her eyes before she returned to the discussion. "The biometric monitoring system is fully compliant with all privacy regulations," she was explaining. "Every veteran provides informed consent, and the data is anonymized for research purposes." One of the board members, a retired judge named Howard Mercer, interrupted. "The issue isn't whether the program is ethical, Sarah. It's the perception. These accusations coming from someone with your mother's standing in the community carry weight regardless of their merit." "So we just caved to pressure?" Sarah asked, frustration evident in her voice. "Abandon treatments that are helping veterans because of baseless accusations?" Another board member, Susan Chen, spoke up. "No one's suggesting abandoning the programs, but perhaps a temporary leadership change while this is sorted out would help insulate the center from controversy. The implication was clear. They wanted Sarah to step down. Michael watched as she absorbed the blow, her shoulders stiffening almost imperceptibly. "I see," Sarah said quietly. "And who would you suggest take over?" The board members exchanged glances. "Dr. Hayes has agreed to return temporarily from retirement," Judge Mercer said. "She has the experience and community standing to weather this storm." Sarah nodded, her expression carefully neutral. "If you think that's best for the center, I won't stand in the way." She looked at Michael. "I assume Mr. Thompson's position is also under review." Susan Chen looked uncomfortable. "Given the nature of some of the accusations, yes. We think it would be best if both of you took a leave of absence until this is resolved." After the board members left, Sarah finally allowed her composure to crack. "She's winning," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everything we've worked for, everything we've built, she's tearing it all down with a few well-placed accusations." Michael pulled her into his arms, feeling the tremors running through her body. "This is temporary. We'll clear our names." Sarah pulled back, her eyes suddenly hard. "It's time I confronted her directly. This has gone on long enough." "Sarah, wait." But she was already gathering her things, a determined set to her jaw that Michael recognized all too well. "I've spent my entire life letting her dictate the terms of our relationship. Not anymore." "At least let me come with you," Michael urged. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "We'll drop Emma at your sister's first. I don't want her anywhere near this confrontation." The drive to the Martinez estate took nearly an hour, leading them from the modest neighborhoods of Millbrook to the exclusive enclave of Lakeview Heights. The family home was an imposing Georgian mansion set well back from the road, surrounded by manicured gardens and protected by an ornate iron gate. Sarah punched a code into the keypad and the gate swung open silently. "I'm surprised she hasn't changed it," she remarked as they drove up the long curved driveway. The front door was opened by a housekeeper who looked startled to see Sarah. "Miss Martinez, we weren't expecting you." "Is my mother home, Lucia?" "Yes, she's in the conservatory, but she has visitors." Sarah was already moving past her, Michael following close behind. They walked through a grand foyer and down a hallway lined with expensive artwork, emerging into a sunlit room filled with exotic plants and wicker furniture. Elaine Martinez sat with three other women, all impeccably dressed, teacups balanced delicately in their hands. The conversation stopped abruptly when Sarah and Michael appeared. "Sarah," Mrs. Martinez said, recovering quickly. "What an unexpected surprise. And Mr. Thompson, too." Her tone made it clear that surprise was a polite substitution for unwelcome intrusion. "I need to speak with you," Sarah said, "privately." Mrs. Martinez smiled apologetically at her guests. "Would you excuse us for a moment, family matter?" The women murmured understanding and moved toward the garden exit, casting curious glances at Michael as they passed. Once they were alone, Mrs. Martinez's demeanor changed instantly. "How dare you barge in here without warning, bringing him into my home? How dare you try to destroy our lives?" Sarah countered, her voice vibrating with controlled fury. "Filing false complaints, spreading rumors, attacking the center. What is wrong with you?" Mrs. Martinez's eyes narrowed. "I'm protecting you as I've always done. You're not thinking clearly. Your judgment has been compromised since Afghanistan." "My judgment is fine," Sarah said. "It's your inability to accept that I'm an adult capable of making my own decisions. That's the problem." "Is that what you think this is about?" Mrs. Martinez asked, her laugh brittle. "Your independence. This is about the family legacy, Sarah. About preserving what your grandfather and father built. You're the sole heir, and you're throwing it all away on what? Playing doctor with damaged veterans. A relationship with a man who can barely support his daughter." Michael felt each word like a physical blow, but remained silent, understanding that this confrontation was Sarah's to lead. "That playing doctor is saving lives," Sarah said, "and Michael has given me more support and understanding than you ever have." Mrs. Martinez turned her attention to Michael. "And what about you, Mr. Thompson? Are you enjoying my daughter's generosity, the prestige of being associated with the Martinez name? Or is it the trust fund my husband has so foolishly established that interests you?" "I don't care about your money or your name," Michael said quietly. "I care about Sarah, about who she is, not what she has." Mrs. Martinez dismissed this with a wave of her hand. "How noble! Yet here you are living in a house my daughter pays for, working at a center she funds. That's enough, Mother, Sarah interrupted. Michael hasn't taken a penny from me. I offered to help with Emiha's education and he refused. The house is his, the job he earned on his own merits. Then he's a fool as well as an opportunist, Mrs. Martinez said. But that's beside the point. The complaints have been filed. The investigations have begun. The damage to your reputations is already done. She looked at Sarah, something almost like pleading, entering her voice. It's not too late to fix this. Come home, turn to the family business. Let the proper doctors handle your PTSD. In time, people will forget this episode. Sarah stared at her mother as if seeing her clearly for the first time. You really don't understand, do you? This isn't an episode. This is my life. The work I'm doing, the relationship I've built with Michael and Emma, it's real and it matters. What matters is family, Mrs. Martinez insisted. Our family. Family doesn't try to destroy each other, Sarah said. Family doesn't use money and influence as weapons. Family supports each other's dreams even when they don't understand them. She took a deep breath. I'm giving you one chance to make this right. Withdraw the complaints. Stop the rumors. Leave us alone to live our lives. Mrs. Martinez's expression hardened. Or what? Or I'll go public with everything. How you manipulated the legal system to file a fraudulent restraining order. How you've used family connections to launch baseless investigations. How you've systematically tried to control me through financial coercion. Mrs. Martinez laughed. You wouldn't dare. The scandal would damage you as much as me. Maybe, Sarah acknowledged, but I'm willing to take that risk if it means finally being free of your manipulation. The two women stared at each other, locked in a battle of wills that seemed to have been brewing for decades. Finally, Mrs. Martinez spoke, her voice cold. You're more like your father than I thought. Weak, sentimental, ruled by emotion rather than reason. I'll take that as a compliment, Sarah said. And speaking of father, I'm going to New York to see him, with or without your approval. Mrs. Martinez's expression flickered something vulnerable, showing through the hard exterior for just a moment. He doesn't want to see you. He's very ill. I know how ill he is, Sarah said more gently, and I think he does want to see me or he wouldn't have established the trust. That was his attorney's idea, not his, Mrs. Martinez said quickly. Too quickly. Sarah studied her mother. You're lying. Why, what are you afraid of? Mrs. Martinez turned away, moving to adjust a plant that needed no adjustment. Your father is dying, Sarah. The cancer has spread to his brain. He's not himself anymore. I'm trying to protect you from seeing him that way. For the first time, Michael heard something authentic in Mrs. Martinez's voice, genuine concern, perhaps even love buried beneath layers of control and manipulation. Sarah seemed to hear it too. Her voice softened slightly. I appreciate that, but it's my choice to make. He's my father. And my husband of 40 years, Mrs. Martinez said, a tremor in her voice. Do you think this has been easy for me? Watching him waste away, knowing there's nothing all our money can do to save him. Sarah moved toward her mother, hesitant but determined. Then why are you doing this? Why waste the precious time he has left on this vendetta against me and Michael? Mrs. Martinez turned, her composure cracking. Because he's leaving you half the company, Sarah. Half of everything we built together. To you who abandoned the business, who chose the military over your family obligations. And for what? So you could come home broken and throw your life away on charity cases. The room fell silent as the true motivation behind Mrs. Martinez's actions finally emerged. Not just control, not just disapproval of Michael, but a profound sense of betrayal, a feeling that her life's work was being devalued by both her husband and daughter. Mother, Sarah said quietly, the company was never my dream. It was yours and Father's. I needed to find my own path. And this is it. Mrs. Martinez gestured vaguely, encompassing Michael and the life Sarah had built in Millbrook. This small-town existence playing savior to broken soldiers. Yes, Sarah said simply, this is where I belong, where I'm needed, where I can do good without being in anyone's shadow. Mrs. Martinez looked away, her shoulders sagging slightly. For a brief moment, Michael saw not the formidable adversary who had tried to destroy their lives, but a frightened woman facing the loss of her husband and the life she had carefully constructed. He asked for you, she admitted finally. in his lucid moments. He wants to see you before. She couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah reached out tentatively, touching her mother's arm. Then let me go to him. Let me say goodbye. Mrs. Martinez pulled away, her vulnerability quickly masked. Do what you want. You always have. She straightened composure, returning like armor being locked into place. As for these accusations, I'll consider withdrawing them. But I make no promises. It wasn't a victory, not by any measure, but it was a crack in the wall, the first sign that Mrs. Martinez might be willing to retreat, if not surrender. As they drove back to Millbrook, Sarah was quiet, processing the confrontation and its revelations. I need to go to New York, she said finally, as soon as possible. Michael nodded. Of course, I'll help with whatever you need. Sarah looked out the window at the passing landscape. She's right about one thing, you know. I did abandon the family business. Turn my back on everything they built. You found your own path, Michael said. There's nothing wrong with that. I know, but I never considered what it cost them, especially my father. She sighed. All those years of not speaking to him, and now it might be too late. They picked up Emma from Michael's sister's house, the little girl immediately sensing the tension, despite their efforts to act normal. As they drove home, Emma asked, Is Grandma Martinez still being mean to you? Sarah turned in her seat, surprised by both the question and the term Grandma Martinez, something Emma had never used before. What makes you ask that, sweetheart? Emma shrugged. Kids at school said she's trying to get you both fired, that she doesn't want us to be a family. Michael caught Sarah's eye, sharing a moment of concern over how much Emma had absorbed despite their attempts to shield her. It's complicated, Em, he said. Sarah's mom and dad are going through a tough time, and sometimes when people are scared or sad, they don't behave very well. Like when I punched Tyler, Emma said thoughtfully. Something like that, Sarah agreed. But Grandma Martinez is a grown-up, so she should know better. The use of Grandma Martinez, accepting Emma's terminology rather than correcting it, didn't escape Michael's notice. Whatever happened with Mrs. Martinez, Sarah was asserting her place in their family unit. That night, after Emma was asleep, they sat at the kitchen table making plans. Sarah would fly to New York the next day to see her father. Michael would remain in Millbrook gathering evidence to refute the complaints and working with Dr. Hayes to protect the center's reputation. I hate leaving you to deal with this alone, Sarah said, guilt clouding her features. You're not, Michael assured her. The center has a whole team of supporters, and your father doesn't have the luxury of time. Sarah nodded, her eyes distant. I keep thinking about what she said, that he's not himself anymore. What if I get there and he doesn't even recognize me? Then you'll still have done the right thing by trying, Michael said gently. No more regrets. Sarah's flight left early the next morning. Michael drove her to the airport. The goodbye waited with all the uncertainties hanging over them. I'll call as soon as I see him, Sarah promised, embracing Michael tightly. Give him my best, Michael said. And Sarah, try to forgive her if you can. Not for her sake, but for yours. Sarah's smile was sad. One step at a time. Michael returned to an empty house, the silence almost oppressive after the emotional intensity of the past 2 days. He had just put on a pot of coffee when the doorbell rang. Opening the door, he found Dr. Hayes standing on his porch, her expression grave. We need to talk, she said. May I come in? Over coffee, she explained that new accusations had emerged overnight, specific detailed allegations that Sarah had falsified research data to secure grant funding for the center's PTSD programs. This is absurd, Michael said. Sarah's research is impeccable. Every study has been peer-reviewed and verified. Dr. Hayes nodded. I know, but these allegations are detailed enough to trigger a federal investigation. The Department of Veterans Affairs has frozen our funding pending review. Michael set down his cup, the ceramic hitting the table with more force than intended. She's escalating, punishing Sarah for going to see her father. Possibly, Director Hayes agreed, but there's more. The allegations include specific references to confidential patient data, information that only someone with inside access to our systems could know. Michael felt cold realization washing over him. You think there's someone working with Mrs. Martinez? Someone inside the center. I don't want to believe it, Dr. Hayes said, but the timing and specificity of these accusations, it's hard to see another explanation. As they discussed possibilities, Michael's phone rang. An unfamiliar New York number. He answered to find a nurse from Memorial Sloan Kettering on the line. "Mr. Thompson, I'm calling about Sarah Martinez. There's been an incident." Michael's heart seemed to stop. "Is she all right?" "She's physically fine," the nurse assured him. "But there was an altercation with her mother in Mr. Martinez's room. Hospital security had to intervene. Ms. Martinez asked me to call you." Michael could hear the careful neutrality in the nurse's voice, the professional tone that masked judgment. "Can I speak with her?" "She's with the hospital administrator right now. She asked me to tell you that she's been banned from the hospital premises. Mrs. Martinez has filed a protective order claiming Ms. Martinez posed a threat to her husband's health with her disruptive behavior." Michael closed his eyes, imagining the scene. Sarah finally reaching her father's room, only to find her mother had arrived first. The confrontation that must have followed, security guards escorting Sarah from the building, while her father watched confused and distressed. "Where is she now?" "She left about 20 minutes ago. She said she was going to her hotel, the Excelsior on West 81st. Michael thanked the nurse and hung up quickly, explaining the situation to Dr. Hayes. "I need to go to New York," he said, already mentally calculating how quickly he could arrange care for Emma and book a flight. Dr. Hayes held up a hand. "Wait, before you go rushing off, think this through. Mrs. Martinez has just demonstrated how easily she can manipulate systems to her advantage. What if this is exactly what she wants? To draw you away from Millbrook while she escalates her campaign against the center." Michael hesitated, torn between his instinct to go to Sarah and the strategic wisdom of Dr. Hayes' warning. "I can't just leave Sarah alone to deal with this." "Of course not," Dr. Hayes agreed, "but perhaps there's a middle path. Let me make some calls. I still have contacts at Columbia Presbyterian. Maybe we can find a way to get Sarah in to see her father through back channels without alerting Mrs. Martinez." While Dr. Hayes made her calls, Michael tried reaching Sarah repeatedly, each call going straight to voicemail. His concern grew with each unanswered ring. Finally, his phone buzzed with a text message, "Hotel bar. Too many people in lobby, can't talk." The cryptic message was so unlike Sarah that it heightened Michael's worry. He tried calling the hotel directly, asking to be connected to Sarah's room, but was told no guest by that name was registered. When he described Sarah, the clerk hesitated, then said, "Oh, you mean the lady who was here earlier? She left about an hour ago, seemed upset." Michael's concern deepened into genuine alarm. Sarah was in an unfamiliar city, emotionally devastated, after being prevented from seeing her dying father, and now apparently wandering Manhattan without a hotel room or any clear destination. Dr. Hayes returned her expression, offering a glimmer of hope. "I reached an old colleague who's now chief of oncology at Columbia. He's willing to arrange a private visit for Sarah to see her father there. They can transfer Thomas for a consultation without Mrs. Martinez knowing." "That's great," Michael said distractedly, still staring at his phone. "But I can't reach Sarah. She's not at the hotel and she's not answering her phone." Dr. Hayes frowned. "That doesn't sound like Sarah." "No, it doesn't," Michael agreed, a terrible suspicion forming. "And it doesn't sound like Mrs. Martinez to file a protective order over a single argument, no matter how heated. She's too image-conscious, too concerned with appearances. Unless she needed a legal reason to control access to Thomas," Dr. Hayes finished the thought. "But why? What would be the point of keeping Sarah from saying goodbye to her father?" Michael thought back to Mrs. Martinez's confession the day before, her fear that Thomas was not himself anymore, her distress over his decision to leave Sarah half the company. "Control," he said slowly. "It's always been about control. What if Thomas isn't as incapacitated as she claimed? What if she's trying to prevent him from changing his will even further, or from telling Sarah something she doesn't want her to know?" The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. "I need to get to New York, now." Hayes nodded. "Go. I'll stay with Emma until your sister can pick her up. And Michael, be careful. If we're right about Elaine Martinez, she's more desperate and dangerous than we realized." Michael booked the first available flight to New York, his mind racing through possibilities as he threw clothes into an overnight bag. He tried calling Sarah repeatedly during the drive to the airport, each unanswered call increasing his dread. In the terminal waiting to board, he finally received a call from an unknown number. "Michael, it's Sarah." Her voice sounded strange, distant and hollow. "Sarah, where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm at my father's apartment in Manhattan." She paused. "I need you to come. Please." "I'm already at the airport. My flight leaves in an hour. What's happening, Sarah?" "I can't explain over the phone. Just get here as soon as you can." She gave him an address on Park Avenue, then added, "Don't tell anyone where you're going. Not Dr. Hayes, not anyone." Before Michael could question this strange request, she hung up. He stared at his phone alarm bells ringing in his mind. Sarah would never exclude Dr. Hayes, who had been their strongest ally throughout everything. Something was very wrong. He dialed Dr. Hayes immediately. "I just heard from Sarah. She says she's at her father's apartment in Manhattan, but something's off. She doesn't sound like herself." "Could someone be forcing her to make the call?" Dr. Hayes asked, voicing the fear Michael had been trying to suppress. "Maybe. She told me not to tell anyone where I was going, including you." "That's definitely not Sarah," Dr. Hayes said firmly. "She knows I'm on your side. Michael, I think you should contact the police. And tell them that my girlfriend's voice sounded strange, that she's at her family's apartment where she has every right to be." Michael ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "They'll dismiss it as a domestic dispute." "Then be very careful," Dr. Hayes urged, "and keep your phone on. I'll see what else I can find out from this end." The flight to New York felt interminable, every minute stretching Michael's nerves tighter. By the time he landed at LaGuardia, a text from Dr. Hayes was waiting. "Called hospital. Thomas Martinez checked out AMA this morning. Staff said he left with wife and daughter. Very unusual given his condition. AMA, against medical advice. Thomas Martinez had left a specialized cancer hospital despite being terminally ill, accompanied by both his wife and apparently Sarah. But if Sarah had been banned from the hospital, how was that possible? And why would they move a dying man from world-class medical care to an apartment, no matter how luxurious? None of it made sense, and the knot of dread in Michael's stomach tightened with each passing minute. The taxi dropped him at an imposing pre-war building on Park Avenue, where a uniformed doorman eyed him suspiciously. "I'm here to see the Martinez family," Michael explained. "Sarah Martinez is expecting me." The doorman checked a list. "Your name, sir?" "Michael Thompson." After a phone call to the apartment, the doorman directed Michael to the private elevator that would take him directly to the penthouse. As the elevator rose, Michael tried calling Sarah again. No answer. The elevator opened directly into a marble-floored foyer. The apartment was silent, the air heavy with the scent of flowers. Dozens of elaborate arrangements lined every surface, as if for a funeral rather than a homecoming. "Sarah," Michael called, moving cautiously into the spacious living room. "It's Michael." A figure appeared in a doorway across the room. Not Sarah, but Elaine Martinez. She wore a simple black dress, her hair perfectly arranged despite the circumstances. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice oddly flat. "You came." "Where's Sarah?" Michael asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "With her father," Mrs. Martinez said, gesturing toward a hallway. "Through there, second door on the right." Michael moved past her, every instinct screaming that something was terribly wrong. The hallway was dimly lit, the walls lined with family photographs, formal portraits of the Martinez family through the years. Sarah as a child, as a teenager, as a young woman in her Marine uniform. Thomas Martinez aging gradually from a handsome man in his prime to a distinguished silver-haired executive. The second door on the right was partially open. Michael knocked softly, then pushed it wider. The room beyond was a master bedroom, converted into a makeshift hospital room. Medical equipment hummed quietly, monitoring vital signs. In the center, on a hospital bed, lay Thomas Martinez, or what remained of him. The vibrant, powerful man from the photographs had been reduced to a skeletal figure, his skin yellowed with jaundice, his breathing shallow and labored. Sarah sat beside the bed, holding her father's hand. She looked up when Michael entered, her face expressionless. "You came." "Of course I came," Michael said, moving to her side. "Sarah, what's going on? Why did you leave the hospital? Dr. Hayes said your father checked out AMA." Sarah's gaze returned to her father. "He wanted to die at home. Mother arranged for private nursing care." Her voice had the same strange, distant quality it had on the phone. Michael crouched beside her chair, trying to catch her eye. "Sarah, look at me. Are you okay?" She turned to him slowly, and Michael was shocked by the emptiness in her eyes. "I'm fine," she said mechanically. "Father wanted to see you too, before the end." "Me?" Michael asked in confusion. "But we've never met." Sarah nodded toward the bed. "He's been asking for you. Go ahead. Talk to him." Michael hesitated, then moved to the other side of the bed, looking down at the dying man. Thomas Martinez's eyes were closed, his breathing ragged. "Mr. Martinez, it's Michael Thompson." The man's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. His lips moved, forming words too quiet to hear. Michael leaned closer. "What did he say?" Sarah asked. "I couldn't make it out," Michael said, still watching Thomas's face for signs of consciousness. "Try again," Sarah insisted, an odd urgency entering her voice. "Ask him about the trust fund." Michael looked up sharply. "What?" "Ask him about the trust fund," Sarah repeated, "about his intentions for the company." The request was so unlike Sarah, so mercenary and inappropriate at such a moment, that Michael knew with sudden certainty that something was deeply wrong. He straightened, studying Sarah more carefully. The blank expression, the flat effect, the strange requests. This wasn't shock or grief. This was something else entirely. "Sarah," he said carefully, "do you remember what you said to me the morning I found you in the hospital parking lot about some things that can't be fixed?" Sarah blinked, her expression unchanging. "Of course, I said some things can't be fixed." It was the right answer, but delivered without the emotional resonance that had made that moment so powerful. Michael tried again. "And Emma's favorite book, the one you've been reading with her at bedtime?" A flicker of confusion crossed Sarah's face. "The princess one." Wrong. Emma hated princess stories. She and Sarah had been reading The Phantom Toll Booth for weeks. Michael's hand moved slowly toward his phone. "I think I should call Dr. Hayes. Let her know we're with your father." "No." The response came too quickly, too forcefully. "No calls. Father needs quiet." Michael nodded as if accepting this, then glanced at his watch. "I'm going to get some water. Can I bring you anything?" Sarah shook her head, her attention returning to her father. Michael backed out of the room, then turned and moved swiftly down the hallway, pulling out his phone as he went. He needed to call Dr. Hayes to call the police, but first he needed to find the real Sarah. As he re-entered the living room, Elaine Martinez was waiting, a glass of amber liquid in her hand. "Going somewhere, Mr. Thompson?" "Just looking for the kitchen. Sarah seems not herself." Mrs. Martinez's smile was cold. "She's saying goodbye to her father. It's an emotional time." "Where is she?" Michael asked, directly, abandoning pretense. "The real Sarah." Mrs. Martinez's expression didn't change. "I don't know what you mean." "The woman in that room isn't Sarah," Michael said. "Where is she?" Before Mrs. Martinez could respond, a new voice entered the conversation. Familiar, but with an accent Michael had never heard before. "She's at the hospital, sedated but otherwise unharmed." Michael turned to find Sarah standing in the hallway entrance. But now her posture was different. Her expression more animated, the blank mask discarded. "You're quicker than we expected," she said, the accent more pronounced. Eastern European, perhaps Russian. "Most men see what they want to see." "Who are you?" Michael demanded. The woman smiled, reaching up to touch her hair. Sarah's hair, but not Sarah's gesture. "An actress primarily, occasionally useful for other talents. The resemblance is remarkable, don't you think? Though I couldn't quite master her military bearing." Michael turned back to Mrs. Martinez, fury building. "What have you done to Sarah?" "Nothing permanent," Mrs. Martinez said dismissively. "After her outburst at the hospital, she needed to be sedated for her own good. The doctors agreed she was experiencing a PTSD episode. She'll recover in a day or two with no memory of the incident." "And then what?" Michael asked. "You keep her drugged until your husband dies, until the will is executed in your favor." Mrs. Martinez's eyes narrowed. "You understand nothing about my family or our business. Thomas built an empire. Sarah would dismantle it for her charitable whims. I'm protecting his legacy." "By hiring an imposter, by drugging your own daughter." Michael couldn't keep the disgust from his voice. "What was the plan here? Why have this person call me to New York?" Mrs. Martinez sipped her drink, perfectly composed. "Insurance. Sarah trusts you implicitly. If she raised questions later about decisions made during this difficult time, your confirmation that she was present and lucid would be valuable. And if I didn't play along, if I realized this wasn't Sarah, the actress laughed softly, then you'd be another disturbed veteran with PTSD making wild accusations during a family tragedy. Who would believe you over the grieving widow and daughter of Thomas Martinez? It was elegant in its cruelty, a plan that exploited every vulnerability, every stigma, every power imbalance. If Michael raised the alarm, he would be dismissed as delusional. If he played along, he would become complicit in Sarah's exploitation. "Where is she?" he asked again, his voice hard. "The real Sarah. Which hospital?" "That's not your concern," Mrs. Martinez said. "You've made your choice, Mr. Thompson. Now I suggest you leave before I call security." Michael's mind raced, assessing options. He could try to force the information from them, but that would only reinforce the narrative of the violent, unstable veteran. He could call the police, but without evidence, it would be his word against theirs. And the Martinez name carried significant weight. "You won't get away with this," he said, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. Mrs. Martinez smiled thinly. "I already have." As Michael turned to leave, the bedroom door opened again. A nurse emerged, her expression grave. "Mrs. Martinez, your husband is asking for you and for Sarah. He's becoming agitated." Mrs. Martinez exchanged a quick glance with the actress, who immediately slipped back into her Sarah impersonation. The blank expression, the slightly distant gaze. They moved toward the bedroom together, the perfect picture of a grieving family. But as they passed, Michael Thomas Martinez's weak voice carried from the bedroom. "Sarah, is that you, Princess?" The actress paused, uncertainty flickering across her features. "Yes, Father, I'm here." "No," came the feeble response. "Not you. Where's my Sarah? Where's my little girl?" For the first time, a crack appeared in Mrs. Martinez's composure. "Thomas, dear Sarah's right here. She's been here all day." "Liar!" Thomas gasped, the single word carrying the weight of decades of awareness. "Where is she, Elaine? What have you done?" Michael moved quickly, pushing past them into the bedroom. Thomas Martinez lay propped against pillows, his eyes now open and burning with unexpected lucidity. When he saw Michael, confusion crossed his features. "Who are you?" "Michael Thompson, sir. I'm a friend of Sarah's." Recognition dawned in the dying man's eyes. "The paramedic. She told me about you." His gaze shifted to the doorway where his wife and the actress stood frozen. "That's not my daughter. Where is Sarah Elaine?" Mrs. Martinez moved to his bedside, her voice soothing. "You're confused, dear. The medication?" "Don't lie to me," Thomas interrupted with surprising strength. "Not now. I'm dying, Elaine. At least give me the dignity of truth in my final hours." The room fell silent, the only sound the soft beeping of the medical equipment. Mrs. Martinez's shoulders sagged, the imperious facade crumbling at last. "She had an episode at the hospital, Thomas. The doctors had to sedate her. She's at Bellevue under psychiatric observation." Thomas closed his eyes briefly, pain crossing his features. "You never understood her. Never saw her strength." "I saw her vulnerability," Mrs. Martinez countered. "Her impulsiveness, her tendency to give her heart to lost causes." She glanced at Michael. "I was protecting her, as I've always done." "No," Thomas said quietly. "You were protecting yourself, your control, your vision of the family legacy." He turned to Michael. "Find her. Get her out. Tell her I'm proud of the path she chose, that I should have said so years ago." Michael nodded. "I will, sir." Mrs. Martinez stepped between them. "This is absurd. You can't simply remove a patient from psychiatric hold. There are procedures, evaluations, which would never have been necessary if you hadn't manipulated the situation," Michael said. He turned back to Thomas. "I'll bring her to you, sir. I promise." As he moved toward the door, Thomas called after him, his voice weakening. "The trust documents. In my study. The safe behind the Monet." He coughed, struggling for breath. "The combination is Sarah's birthday. Everything she needs to protect herself from Elaine." Mrs. Martinez lunged for the call button, summoning the nurse. "He's delusional. The cancer has spread to his brain. He doesn't know what he's saying." But the clarity in Thomas Martinez's eyes told a different story. As the nurse rushed in, Michael slipped out, not toward the elevator, but deeper into the apartment, searching for the study. He had minutes at most before Mrs. Martinez realized what he was doing. The study was at the end of the hallway, a masculine space of leather and mahogany. The Monet, a serene landscape of water lilies, hung on the far wall. Michael moved it aside to reveal a wall safe. He punched in Sarah's birthday, March 17th, and heard the satisfying click of the lock disengaging. Inside were several folders of legal documents, a small box of jewelry, and a sealed envelope with Sarah's name written in a shaky hand. Michael grabbed everything, stuffing it into his jacket just as footsteps approached the study door. "Mr. Thompson." It was the actress, her voice once again a perfect imitation of Sarah's. "What are you doing in Father's study?" Michael turned the safe, now closed, and the painting back in place. "Looking for the bathroom." Got turned around. She smiled, not believing him for a second. "Mother is calling security. I suggest you leave while you can." Michael moved past her, walking quickly toward the foyer. The elevator doors opened as he approached, revealing two burly men in dark suits. Private security, not building staff. "This gentleman was just leaving," the actress called to them. "Please escort him out." One of the men stepped forward. "Mrs. Martinez says he took something from the apartment. We'll need to search him before he leaves." Michael backed away, calculating his options. The documents were evidence of Mrs. Martinez's machinations, possibly the only leverage that could help free Sarah. He couldn't surrender them. "I don't think so," he said, continuing to back up. "I'm leaving now, with or without an escort." The security guards exchanged glances, then moved toward him with professional efficiency. Michael had no illusions about his chances against two trained professionals, but he had one advantage. He knew the apartment's layout better than they did. He turned and sprinted down the hallway past the study, looking for another exit. Large apartments like this often had service entrances, secondary elevators for staff. He found what he was looking for at the end of a side corridor, a small elevator with a simple call button. Behind him, he could hear the guards in pursuit. The elevator doors opened just as they rounded the corner. Michael slipped inside, punching the button for the lobby. The last thing he saw as the doors closed was the actress watching him with a mixture of admiration and amusement, as if the entire situation were an entertaining theatrical production rather than the systematic destruction of a family. In the lobby, Michael exited through a service entrance, emerging onto a side street rather than the main Park Avenue frontage. He hailed a taxi, immediately directing the driver to Bellevue Hospital. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, Michael pulled out his phone and called Dr. Hayes. "I found her," he said without preamble. "She's at Bellevue Hospital under psychiatric hold. Mrs. Martinez had her sedated after an incident at her father's hospital room." "My God," Dr. Hayes breathed. "Are you sure?" Thomas Martinez confirmed it himself. "He's dying, but he's lucid, at least for now, and he's on Sarah's side." Michael hesitated, then added, "I have documents from his safe. Legal papers, possibly his real will or trust documents. He said they would protect Sarah from her mother." "Be careful, Michael," Dr. Hayes warned. "If Mrs. Martinez is willing to institutionalize her own daughter, there's no telling what else she might do." "I know, but Thomas Martinez wants to see Sarah before he dies. He asked me to bring her to him. I have to try." "What can I do from here?" Michael thought quickly. "Contact our attorney, let him know what's happening, and call Sarah's therapist, Dr. Sullivan. We might need her professional opinion to counter whatever diagnosis Mrs. Martinez arranged." As the taxi navigated through Manhattan traffic, Michael examined the documents he'd taken. The trust documents were complex legal papers establishing what appeared to be an irrevocable trust in Sarah's name, controlling not just money but a significant portion of Martinez Medical Supply's voting shares. There was also a more recent document, a codicil to Thomas Martinez's will dated just 1 week earlier, explicitly stating that Sarah was to have full control of her inheritance regardless of her mental state, with provisions preventing Elaine Martinez from exercising any form of conservatorship. Thomas had anticipated his wife's tactics and taken steps to counter them. The question was whether these documents had been properly executed and filed, or if they were merely drafts that Elaine had prevented from being finalized. The sealed letter to Sarah felt heavy in Michael's hands. He wouldn't open it. That was for Sarah alone. but its existence suggested Thomas had been preparing for this confrontation long before his cancer reached its terminal stage. At Bellevue, Michael approached the psychiatric unit with trepidation. How would he gain access to Sarah? What if Mrs. Martinez had left instructions to prevent him from seeing her? He was considering his options when his phone rang. An unknown New York number. Michael Thompson, he answered cautiously. Mr. Thompson, this is Dr. William Chen from Memorial Sloan Kettering. I understand you're trying to locate Sarah Martinez. Michael tensed. Who told you that? Thomas Martinez himself. He called me directly requesting my help. He was my patient until this morning's unusual discharge. Is he all right? Michael asked. As well as can be expected for someone in his condition, Dr. Chen replied, but he's very concerned about his daughter. He believes she's been involuntarily committed under false pretenses. She has, Michael confirmed. I'm at Bellevue now trying to figure out how to reach her. That's why I'm calling. I've contacted a colleague in Bellevue's psychiatric department, Dr. Rebecca Goldstein. She's reviewing Mrs. Martinez's case now and has some concerns about the circumstances of her admission. She's expecting you at the north entrance to the psychiatric wing. Michael felt a surge of hope. Thank you, Duchen, and please thank Mr. Martinez for me. There's one more thing, Duchen added. Thomas Martinez has been readmitted to Memorial Sloan Kettering, against his wife's wishes. He's asking to see his daughter as soon as possible. The hospital administration is aware of the situation and has implemented security measures to prevent any further incidents. I understand, Michael said. I'll bring her directly there, assuming Dr. Goldstein can help. Goldstein proved to be a formidable ally, a sharp-minded psychiatrist with little patience for what she called the misuse of psychiatric holds as a control mechanism. After reviewing Sarah's admission documents, she had serious concerns. The admitting physician noted acute agitation and paranoid ideation, she explained to Michael. But the specifics are vague and the medication ordered is excessive for the symptoms described. Add to that the fact that Mrs. Martinez specifically requested no visitors and no communication with outside parties. Can you release her? Michael asked. Dr. Goldstein hesitated. Legally, I need to complete my own evaluation first. But given the circumstances, I'm expediting the process. I'd also like to see those legal documents you mentioned. After reviewing Thomas Martinez's trust documents and codicil, Dr. Goldstein appeared even more concerned. This appears to be a clear attempt to circumvent Mr. Martinez's wishes regarding his daughter's autonomy. I'll proceed with the evaluation immediately. Michael waited anxiously outside Sarah's room while Dr. Goldstein conducted her assessment. After what felt like hours but was likely only 30 minutes, the doctor emerged. Miss Martinez is showing no signs of psychosis, paranoia, or acute agitation, she reported. She's groggy from the medication, but otherwise lucid. I'm ordering her immediate release into your care, Mr. Thompson. Relief flooded through Michael. Can I see her now? Dr. Goldstein nodded. She's asking for you, but I should warn you, she's still processing what happened. She may be disoriented and upset. Sarah was sitting on the edge of the hospital bed when Michael entered, still wearing the clothes she'd had on when he last saw her at the airport. She looked up, her eyes clearing, as she recognized him. Michael, she said, her voice hoarse. How did you find me? Michael crossed the room in 3 strides, gathering her into his arms. Your father, he told me where to look. Sarah pulled back, searching his face. My father, you saw him? Yes, he's been readmitted to Memorial Sloan Kettering. He wants to see you. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She said he didn't want to see me, that he was too confused, too sick, that I would only upset him. She lied, Michael said gently, about that and many other things. Your father is very clear about wanting to see you. He's proud of you, Sarah, of the path you have chosen. Sarah absorbed this emotions playing across her face, relief, grief, anger, hope. What else did she lie about? Michael hesitated, then told her about the actress hired to impersonate her, about Thomas's lucidity and his hidden documents, about the elaborate scheme to control both Sarah and her inheritance during Thomas's final days. Sarah listened in stunned silence, her expression hardening with each revelation. When Michael finished, she stood up steadier now. I need to see him before she finds a way to interfere again. Dr. Goldstein is discharging you into my care, Michael explained. and the hospital administration at Memorial Sloan Kettering is aware of the situation. They've implemented security measures. Sarah nodded, determination replacing the vulnerability of moments before. Let's go. As they prepared to leave, Michael handed her the sealed envelope from her father's safe. He wanted you to have this. Sarah took it, her hand trembling slightly. She broke the seal and unfolded a single sheet of paper, reading silently. Whatever the letter contained, it brought fresh tears to her eyes, but also a sense of peace that Michael hadn't seen in her since before the restraining order. He knew, she said softly, tucking the letter into her pocket. He knew what she was doing all these years, and he was trying in his own way to protect me from it. She looked up at Michael, a new resolve in her eyes. I'm ready now to see him, to say goodbye, and then to build something new from all of this. As they walked out of Bellevue together, Sarah's hand firmly in his, Michael felt the weight of the past months, the accusations, the restraining order, the attacks on their reputations and livelihoods, begin to lift. They still had battles ahead, reinstating their positions at the Veterans Center, clearing their names, dealing with the aftermath of Elaine Martinez's machinations. But they would face those challenges together, stronger for having weathered this storm. And for the first time since that morning in the hospital parking lot, Michael felt certain that some things, even those that seemed irreparably broken, could indeed be fixed, or at least transformed into something new and unexpectedly beautiful. The halls of Memorial Sloan Kettering were hushed, the lighting soft and indirect, designed to provide comfort rather than institutional sterility. As Michael and Sarah approached the private room where Thomas Martinez had been readmitted, a security guard checked their IDs before nodding them through. The precautions against Elaine Martinez's interference were subtle but thorough. Sarah hesitated at the threshold, suddenly uncertain. What if we're too late? What if he's not lucid anymore? Michael squeezed her hand. We'll deal with whatever we find. Together. They entered to find Thomas propped up against pillows, oxygen tubes in his nostrils, an IV in his arm. Despite the medical interventions, he appeared more at peace than he had in the penthouse. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow but regular. Dr. Chen stood by the bed, monitoring vital signs. He looked up when they entered, relief evident in his expression. Ms. Martinez, I'm glad you're here. Your father has been asking for you. At the sound of voices, Thomas's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, his gaze was unfocused. Then it sharpened as he recognized Sarah. Princess, he whispered, using the childhood nickname Sarah had mentioned only once to Michael. You came. Sarah moved to his bedside, taking his frail hand in hers. I'm here, Dad. Dr. Chen motioned to Michael. Let's give them some privacy. As they stepped into the hallway, he added in a low voice, the cancer has spread significantly. We're making him comfortable, but realistically, he has hours rather than days. Michael nodded, absorbing the gravity of the situation. What about Mrs. Martinez? Has she tried to intervene? She called twice, demanding to be allowed to see her husband. When informed of the restraining order he requested against her, she threatened legal action. Dr. Chen's expression was professionally neutral, but his tone conveyed disapproval. Hospital security is prepared if she attempts to enter in person. Inside the room, Sarah sat close to her father, their hands still linked. I'm sorry, Thomas said, each word clearly an effort, for not standing up to her, for not supporting your choices. It's okay, Dad, Sarah said, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. No, he insisted with surprising firmness. It's not okay. I was a coward. Easier to focus on business. Let her handle family matters. He paused, gathering strength. Should have told you how proud I was when you joined the Marines, when you became a doctor, when you chose to help others instead of chasing money. Sarah's composure broke, quiet sobs shaking her shoulders. I needed to hear that so much. Thomas squeezed her hand weakly. Did Michael find the documents? Yes, Sarah confirmed. The trust papers, the codicil to your will. Good. Thomas closed his eyes briefly. Your mother will fight it. She's already put her plans in motion. The actress, the psychiatric hold. Just the beginning. Why now? Sarah asked. After all these years of controlling me through the family money, why go to these extremes? Thomas's expression grew somber. Because I finally stood up to her, changed my will, gave you control of your half, independent of her approval. He coughed the effort, leaving him drained. She'll claim I wasn't competent, that the cancer affected my judgment. We have Dr. Chen's assessment, Sarah assured him, and Dr. Goldstein's report from Bellevue. They both confirm you're lucid, making your own decisions. Thomas nodded weakly. There's more. In the safe at my office, evidence of financial irregularities. Your mother has been moving company funds, preparing for a fight. He gripped Sarah's hand with sudden urgency. The company does good work, Sarah. Saves lives. Don't let her destroy it out of spite. I won't, Sarah promised. But I don't know anything about running a medical supply company. You know more than you think, Thomas countered. And you have good people around you. His gaze shifted to the doorway where Michael stood. People who see your worth beyond your name or your money. Michael approached the bed, uncomfortable with eavesdropping, but drawn by Thomas's acknowledgement. Sir, Thank you, Thomas interrupted, for finding my daughter, for bringing her to me. He looked between them, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. You're good for each other. I can see that. Chen returned, apologetically checking monitors and adjusting medication. The pain, he asked Thomas. Manageable, Thomas replied, though the tightness around his eyes suggested otherwise. I can increase the morphine, Dr. Chen offered. Thomas shook his head slightly. Not yet. Need to stay clear. A little longer. He turned back to Sarah. Tell me about your work. The Veterans Center, the PTSD treatments. I want to hear while I still can. For the next hour, Sarah talked about the center, about the innovative treatments they were developing, about the lives they were helping to rebuild. Thomas listened intently, asking occasional questions that revealed both his business acumen and his genuine interest. Michael contributed when asked, but mostly watched the healing taking place between father and daughter. Not complete, not perfect, but real and profound in the time they had left. As evening deepened into night, Thomas's energy began to fade. Dr. Chen increased his pain medication, warning them that it would likely affect his lucidity. You should say what needs to be said, he advised gently. Thomas beckoned Sarah closer. The company foundation, he whispered. Use it. Fund your center, your research. Make it my legacy too. I will, Sarah promised. We'll help so many people, Dad. Thomas smiled faintly. That's my girl. His gaze shifted to Michael. Take care of her. Not that she needs it, but everyone needs someone in their corner. I will, sir. Michael set his throat tight with emotion for this man he had only just met. Thomas's eyes began to drift closed, the medication taking effect. Love you, princess, he murmured. Always have. I love you too, Dad, Sarah whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. They remained through the night, Sarah unwilling to leave, even when Thomas slipped into unconsciousness. Michael dozed in the recliner by the window, waking occasionally to check on Sarah, to bring her water or coffee, to remind her to eat something from the tray a nurse had brought. Shortly after dawn, Thomas Martinez took his last breath, his daughter's hand in his final affairs, in order his conscience as clear as he could make it in the time he had left. There was no drama, no last-minute rally, just the quiet ending of a life that had been lived with both significant achievements and profound regrets. Sarah sat motionless for several minutes after Dr. Chen confirmed the death, her face composed, but her eyes reflecting a complex mixture of grief and relief. Finally, she stood, kissed her father's forehead one last time, and turned to Michael. Let's go. There's a lot to do. Are you sure? Michael asked, concerned by her abrupt shift. We can stay as long as you need. I'm sure, Sarah said firmly. Dad gave me the tools to fight back against my mother. The best way to honor him is to use them. They left the hospital into the brightness of a Manhattan morning, the city already humming with activity, indifferent to their personal tragedy. Sarah walked with purpose, her grief contained, but not denied, channeled into determination. Where to first? Michael asked as they reached the street. Dad's office, Sarah decided. We need whatever evidence he mentioned before Mother realizes he's gone and tries to remove it. Martinez Medical Supply's headquarters occupied the top floors of a sleek midtown tower. As they approached the reception desk in the marble lobby, Sarah straightened her shoulders, adopting the bearing that had served her through military service and surgical residency. Sarah Martinez to see Jonathan Weber, she told the receptionist. He's expecting me. It wasn't true, but the confidence in her voice prevented any challenge. The receptionist made a quick call, then directed them to the executive elevator. "Who's Jonathan Weber?" Michael asked as they ascended. "Dad's CFO and closest friend on the board," Sarah explained. "If anyone knows about the financial irregularities Dad mentioned, it would be John." Jonathan Weber proved to be a tall, austere man in his 60s with steel gray hair and penetrating blue eyes. His office was minimalist but elegant, with views stretching across Manhattan. He rose when Sarah entered, his formal demeanor softening. "Sarah, this is unexpected." His gaze moved to Michael, questioning. "This is Michael Thompson," Sarah introduced. "My partner." The word choice, partner rather than boyfriend or friend, was deliberate, establishing Michael's right to be included in the conversation to come. Weber nodded a greeting, then returned his attention to Sarah. "I'm sorry about Thomas. Chen called to inform me this morning." "Thank you," Sarah said simply. "Before he died, my father told me about financial irregularities involving my mother. He said there was evidence in his office safe." Weber's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his eyes. Caution, perhaps, or calculation. "That's a serious allegation. Are you sure Thomas was lucid when he made it?" "Completely lucid," Sarah confirmed. "He also told me he changed his will, giving me control of my inheritance, independent of my mother's approval." Weber gestured for them to sit. "This puts me in a difficult position, Sarah. As CFO, my fiduciary duty is to the company and its shareholders. As your father's friend, I want to honor his wishes." He steepled his fingers. "But Elaine is still the majority shareholder, and she's already moving to assert control." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "She called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon to address leadership transition following Thomas's incapacity. She didn't know he had died when she scheduled it." Weber's tone was carefully neutral. "She's proposing herself as interim CEO." Sarah absorbed this with remarkable composure. "And what do you think of that proposal?" Weber hesitated, clearly weighing his response. "Elaine has been involved with the company since its founding. She understands the business, but she doesn't have my father's vision," Sarah completed, "or his ethical compass." "Those would be my concerns, yes," Weber acknowledged. "However, my personal opinions aren't relevant to the board's decision." "And they are to me," Sarah countered, "and they would have been to my father." Weber studied her for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "Thomas came to me 6 months ago when his prognosis became terminal. He was concerned about Elaine's plans for the company, specifically her intention to discontinue the foundation's support for PTSD research and treatment." "Why would she do that?" Michael asked, breaking his silence. "It's good publicity if nothing else." "Because it was Thomas's passion project," Weber explained, "and because it doesn't generate the profit margins that Elaine prioritizes." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. "The evidence in the safe." Weber rose, moving to a landscape painting on the wall adjacent to his office. He swung it aside to reveal a digital keypad. "Thomas gave me the combination for emergencies. I would consider this an emergency." Inside the safe were several USB drives, paper files, and a leather-bound ledger. Weber spread them on his desk, explaining each item. The USB drives contained backup copies of financial transactions that Elaine had authorized without proper board approval. The files documented her gradual consolidation of power within the company, and the ledger, kept in Thomas's meticulous handwriting, tracked a pattern of decisions that prioritized profit over patient welfare. Decisions Thomas had opposed but had been outvoted on by board members loyal to Elaine. "None of this is necessarily illegal," Weber cautioned. "Unethical in some cases, certainly, but carefully maintained within technical, legal boundaries." "It's enough," Sarah said, reviewing the materials. "Combined with her actions against me, the false restraining order, the psychiatric hold hiring an actress to impersonate me, we can build a case that she's unfit to lead the company my father built." Weber looked troubled. "Those are serious accusations, Sarah." "Do you have evidence?" Michael explained about Dr. Goldstein's report from Bellevue, the testimony they could obtain from Dr. Chen about Thomas's lucidity, and the actress whose identity they could likely discover with proper investigation. "It won't be easy," Weber warned. "Elaine has cultivated the board for years. Many members owe their positions to her influence." "We don't need it to be easy," Sarah said with quiet determination. "We just need it to be possible." They spent the next hours preparing for the board meeting, Sarah absorbing as much information as she could about the company's operations, the foundation's work, and the pending decisions that would affect both. Michael contacted Dr. Hayes back in Millbrook, updating her on the situation and asking her to gather documentation about the Veterans Center's results with PTSD treatment, evidence they could use to defend the foundation's funding. By the time the board members began arriving for the emergency meeting, Sarah was prepared for battle. She changed into clothes borrowed from her father's private bathroom. Not ideal, but better than the rumpled outfit she'd been wearing since her aborted hospital visit the day before. Michael remained by her side, silent support, as they waited in a conference room adjacent to the boardroom. "You don't have to do this," Michael told her as they heard voices gathering next door. "We could walk away, go back to Millbrook, continue our work at the center, regardless of what happens here." Sarah shook her head. "If I walk away, she wins. Not just the company, but the narrative, that I'm unstable, unfit, incapable of handling responsibility." She took his hand. "Besides, Dad trusted me with this. I won't let him down again." The moment Elaine Martinez entered the boardroom, an assistant rushed to inform her of Sarah's presence in the building. Through the glass partition, Michael watched her composure falter briefly before she reassembled it, her back stiffening as she prepared to confront the daughter she had tried to remove from the equation. Weber came to escort them into the meeting. "I've informed the board that Thomas passed away this morning and that Sarah is here as his designated successor. Elaine is displeased." The boardroom fell silent as Sarah entered, all eyes tracking her progress to the empty chair at the table. Thomas's chair positioned directly opposite Elaine's. Michael took a seat against the wall with other non-board observers, close enough to offer support, but respecting that this was Sarah's arena. "Sarah," Elaine acknowledged, her voice brittle, "this is a private board meeting. While we appreciate your concern for your father's company, this isn't the appropriate time for family sentimentality." "I'm not here out of sentiment, Mother," Sarah replied evenly. "I'm here as Dad's designated successor and the owner of 45% of Martinez Medical Supplies voting shares." A murmur ran through the board members. Elaine's smile remained fixed. "Your father's condition these past weeks rendered him incapable of making binding business decisions. Any recent changes to his will or the company structure would naturally be subject to legal review. Duchenne's medical assessment confirms Dad was fully lucid until the final hours of his life," Sarah countered. "And I think we all know that he's been planning for succession since his diagnosis 6 months ago." Jonathan Weber cleared his throat. "If I may, I can confirm that Thomas discussed his succession plans with me extensively. He was of sound mind and clear about his intentions regarding Sarah's role in the company." Elaine's smile tightened. "John, your friendship with Thomas is well known and appreciated, but friendship can sometimes cloud objective business judgment, as can family relationships," Weber replied mildly. The board chairman, a distinguished man named Robert Hargrove, intervened. "Perhaps we should address the immediate issue before us. With Thomas's passing, the company needs clear leadership. Elaine, you have proposed yourself as interim CEO. Does anyone have alternative suggestions?" "I propose a co-leadership model," Sarah said before anyone else could speak. "Jonathan Weber as interim CEO, handling day-to-day operations with major strategic decisions requiring approval from both the CEO and the Martinez family trustees, myself and my mother." It was a reasonable compromise, one that acknowledged Elaine's experience while preventing her from having unilateral control. Several board members nodded appreciatively. Elaine's eyes narrowed. "And what qualifies you to make strategic decisions for a multi-billion-dollar medical supply company, Sarah? Your military service was admirable but hardly relevant to corporate governance. My medical training, surgical experience, and work with cutting-edge PTSD treatments give me insight into patient needs that this company was founded to serve." Sarah responded, "Dad always said Martinez Medical Supplies succeeded because it put patients before profits. I intend to honor that philosophy." The subtle reminder of Thomas's founding principles resonated with several board members, particularly the older ones who had been with the company from its early days. "Admirable sentiments," Elaine said dismissively, "but sentiment doesn't deliver shareholder value." "Actually, it does," Sarah countered. "Our reputation for ethical practices and patient-centered innovation is our greatest asset. It's why hospitals choose our products over cheaper alternatives." The debate continued, growing increasingly technical as Sarah demonstrated her understanding of the company's operations, knowledge absorbed from her father's files and Weber's briefing. Michael watched with quiet pride as she held her own against board members with decades of corporate experience, never rattled, never defensive. Finally, Chairman Hargrove called for a vote on the interim leadership proposal. The result was narrowly in Sarah's favor, 7 votes to 6, with Weber's support proving decisive. Elaine's composure cracked. "This is absurd. You're allowing an inexperienced, emotionally unstable woman to influence decisions affecting thousands of employees and millions of patients." "Mother," Sarah said quietly, "let's not do this here." "Why not here?" Elaine demanded. "Let the board understand directly who they've just empowered." She turned to the members. "My daughter has suffered from PTSD since returning from Afghanistan. She's been under psychiatric care, including a recent hospitalization for paranoid delusions. Is this really who you want making critical decisions?" The room fell uncomfortably silent. Sarah took a deep breath, then spoke with a remarkable control. "Yes, I have PTSD from my military service. I've never hidden that fact. I've sought appropriate treatment and continue to manage my condition successfully." She looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. "What my mother fails to mention is that my recent hospitalization was the result of her filing false reports with medical authorities, part of a pattern of attempting to control me by any means necessary, including hiring an actress to impersonate me while I was sedated against my will." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Elaine's face flushed with anger. "These are absurd accusations. You've clearly had another episode." "I have documentation," Sarah interrupted calmly. "Dr. Goldstein's report from Bellevue confirming there was no medical basis for my psychiatric hold. Dr. Chen's assessment of my father's mental state when he told Michael where to find me. Security footage from Memorial Sloan Kettering showing your confrontation with hospital staff when they refused to continue sedating me." She hadn't mentioned the security footage before. Michael wasn't even sure it existed, but the calculated bluff hit its mark. Elaine's expression faltered as she mentally reviewed what such footage might show. "This is a family dispute being inappropriately aired in a business setting," Elaine said, regaining some composure. "I move to adjourn this meeting until cooler heads prevail." "Actually," Weber interjected, "there's one more item we should address while we're all here." He distributed copies of documents from Thomas's safe. "These show a pattern of financial decisions made without proper board approval. As CFO, I'm obligated to bring them to the board's attention." What followed was a methodical dismantling of Elaine's carefully constructed power base. Weber presented evidence of decisions made without required consultations, funds redirected from approved projects to Elaine's preferred initiatives, and subtle manipulations of financial reporting to emphasize successes while obscuring problematic trends. By the time he finished, several board members who had voted for Elaine were looking distinctly uncomfortable. Chairman Hargrove, clearly disturbed by the revelations, called for a revote on the interim leadership proposal. This time, the result was more decisive, 9-4 in favor of Weber as CEO, with Sarah as family trustee. Elaine stood abruptly. "This isn't over. You'll be hearing from my attorneys." She gathered her things with brittle dignity, then paused beside Sarah's chair. "Your father would be ashamed of your behavior today." Sarah met her gaze steadily. "No, Mother. For the first time in years, I think he'd actually be proud." After Elaine stormed out, the meeting continued with discussions of immediate priorities and transition plans. Sarah participated, fully demonstrating both her intelligence and her commitment to her father's vision. When they finally adjourned 2 hours later, she looked exhausted but satisfied. "That was impressive," Michael told her as they left the building. "You handled yourself like you've been doing this for years." Sarah smiled wearily. "I grew up listening to my father talk about the company. I guess I absorbed more than I realized." She looked up at the towering headquarters. "I never wanted this responsibility. Still don't really. But if it means protecting Dad's legacy and ensuring the foundation can continue supporting veterans, it's worth it." They checked into a hotel near the hospital, both too drained to make the journey back to Millbrook that night. Sarah collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, the adrenaline of the day finally wearing off. "I should call Emma," Michael said, suddenly remembering his daughter amid the day's drama. "Let her know we're okay." "Tell her I miss her," Sarah murmured, already drifting toward sleep. "Tell her we'll be home soon." Michael stepped into the bathroom to make the call, giving Sarah privacy as the emotions of the day caught up with her. He could hear her quiet sobs through the door, grief for her father, a relief at their victory, exhaustion from the battle, all finally finding release. His conversation with Emma was brief but reassuring. Dr. Hayes had explained enough of the situation to satisfy the child's curiosity without burdening her with details. "When are you coming home?" Emma asked, the only question that really mattered to her. "Tomorrow," Michael promised. "Sarah and I both miss you." "Is Sarah's dad really gone?" Emma asked, her voice small. "Yes, sweetheart. He died this morning. Like Mommy died." Michael closed his eyes against the sudden sting of tears. "Yes, but different too. Sarah's dad was very sick for a long time. He had a chance to say goodbye." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this. "That's good, I think. I wish I could have said goodbye to Mommy." "Me too, Em," Michael said softly. "Me too." When he returned to the bedroom, Sarah was asleep, tear tracks still visible on her cheeks. Michael gently removed her shoes and covered her with the hotel duvet before settling into the armchair by the window, watching the Manhattan skyline glitter in the gathering darkness. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings, funeral arrangements, and negotiations with board members to solidify Sarah's position. Michael remained by her side throughout, offering support, but never interfering as she navigated the complex web of corporate politics and family dynamics. The funeral was a strictly controlled affair, with Elaine orchestrating a public display of grief that bore little resemblance to her private behavior. Sarah participated with quiet dignity, honoring her father without engaging in her mother's theatrics. Several board members attended their presence, a subtle endorsement of Sarah's new role in the company. Elaine made one final attempt at reconciliation, or more accurately, control, approaching Sarah after the service with an offer that revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of her daughter. "You can have your Veterans Center," she said, as if bestowing a great gift. "Full funding, complete autonomy. Ask is that you step back from day-to-day involvement with the company. Leave the business decisions to those with experience." Sarah regarded her mother with something like pity. "This isn't a negotiation, Mother. I'm not trading away my birthright for your approval anymore." "You've never understood business," Elaine insisted. "Your father indulged your idealism, but reality is harsher. The company needs practical leadership." "The company needs ethical leadership," Sarah countered. "And the balance that comes from remembering our purpose isn't just profit." Elaine's expression hardened. "You'll destroy everything we built." "No," Sarah said quietly. "I'll honor what Dad built. What you built was a fortress of control, and yes, I intend to dismantle that brick by brick." It was the final conversation between mother and daughter, not a reconciliation, not even a true goodbye, but an acknowledgement that some relationships cannot be healed, only survived and transcended. A week after Thomas Martinez's death, Michael and Sarah finally returned to Millbrook. The Veterans Center staff welcomed them with relief and support, having been kept informed by Dr. Hayes but worried nonetheless. Emma greeted them with fierce hugs and a detailed account of everything they'd missed, her childish enthusiasm, a balm after the intensity of Manhattan. Life gradually resumed its rhythm, but with significant changes. Sarah split her time between Millbrook and New York, spending 3 days a week at the company headquarters and 4 at the Veterans Center. The foundation's funding was secured and expanded, allowing them to implement the advanced PTSD treatments that had been in development. Michael returned to nursing at St. Mary's, his position restored with a formal apology from the administration. He also took on a larger role at the Veterans Center, helping Dr. Hayes integrate their treatment protocols with the hospital's services. 3 months after Thomas's death, on a crisp autumn evening, reminiscent of the day they'd first confronted Elaine together, Sarah found Michael on the front porch of their home. For it was truly their home now, with Sarah's clothes in the closet and her books on the shelves, her presence woven into the fabric of their daily lives. "I have news," she said, settling beside him on the porch swing. "The board approved the merger with Columbia Presbyterian's Research Division. We'll be developing new applications for the VR therapy system, expanding beyond PTSD to other trauma-related conditions." "That's wonderful," Michael said, genuinely pleased but sensing there was more. Sarah nodded, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "There's something else, something I've been thinking about for a while." She took his hand, suddenly uncharacteristically nervous. "What would you think about making this arrangement permanent to us, I mean? This family we've been building?" Michael stared at her, momentarily speechless. "Sarah Martinez, are you proposing to me?" She laughed, the sound bright in the evening air. I guess I am. Badly, apparently. Michael pulled her close, kissing her softly. Yes, he said simply. Of course, yes. Even with everything that comes with me, Sarah asked. The company responsibilities, the PTSD, my mother's ongoing legal challenges. All of it, Michael assured her. The good and the difficult. That's what family means. Emma found them there still talking and planning when she came looking for help with her homework. She settled naturally between them on the swing, her presence completing their circle. Sarah asked me to marry her, Michael told his daughter. What do you think about that? Emma considered this with the serious deliberation only a 9-year-old could muster. Does that mean Sarah will be my stepmom, like in Cinderella? Sarah laughed. Well, I promise to be nothing like the stepmom in Cinderella. Good, Emma said decisively, because that would be weird since you're already like a real mom anyway. She returned her attention to her homework, unaware of the impact her casual acceptance had on both adults. Later that night after Emma was asleep, Sarah found the marine chronometer that had started everything. The broken timepiece that Michael had been carrying when he found her bleeding in the hospital parking lot. It still sat on his dresser, the hands frozen at 11:47, the glass still cracked in its spiderweb pattern. You never got it fixed, she observed, running her finger lightly over the fractured surface. No, Michael admitted. At first it was a reminder of Linda, of the moment everything changed. Then it became something else, a symbol of how life can stop but still continue, how broken things can still have purpose. Sarah nodded, understanding completely. Some things can't be fixed, she said, echoing the words she'd spoken that first morning. But some things don't need to be fixed. Michael completed the thought. They just need to be accepted and loved as they are. Sarah placed the chronometer back on the dresser, then turned to embrace him. I think your perspective is healthier than mine was. When I said those words, I meant that some damage is permanent, some loss is irreversible. And that's true, Michael acknowledged, but it's not the whole truth. What I've learned, what we've learned together, is that broken doesn't mean worthless. Change doesn't mean diminished. Sarah rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. I still have nightmares about Afghanistan. Probably always will. I still miss Linda, Michael admitted. Still feel guilty sometimes about being happy without her. Broken pieces, Sarah murmured. Making something new, Michael added. Outside their window, autumn leaves drifted in the moonlight, each one a small surrender to the changing seasons. Inside, wrapped in each other's arms, they found the peace that comes not from absence of struggle, but from having someone to struggle alongside. Someone who sees your broken places and loves you, not despite them, but with them as essential parts of the whole. 2 years later, on a brilliant spring morning, the Millbrook Veterans Center celebrated the opening of its new PTSD research wing, a state-of-the-art facility funded by the Martinez Foundation and staffed by specialists from across the country. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew local media, medical professionals, and supporters from the community. Sarah, elegant in her role as foundation director, but still retaining the straightforward manner of her military days, gave a brief speech emphasizing the collaborative nature of the project. This facility represents what can happen when corporate resources meet compassionate expertise, when profit motives align with human needs rather than opposing them. Michael stood nearby now, the center's clinical director, having completed his advanced practice nursing degree. Beside him, Emma fidgeted in her dress clothes, 11 years old, and increasingly resembling her mother in both appearance and spirit. As Sarah concluded her remarks, and the small crowd applauded, a familiar figure approached from the parking lot. Elaine Martinez, immaculately dressed as always, but somehow diminished the imperious confidence, replaced by a brittle dignity. Sarah tensed, then deliberately relaxed. I didn't expect to see you here, she said when her mother reached them. I received an invitation, Elaine replied, from the board. Jonathan's doing, I imagine, Sarah said, naming the CEO who had become her mentor in navigating corporate politics. He believes in reconciliation. A foolish concept in business, Elaine remarked, but without her former bite. She glanced around at the new facility, her expression carefully neutral. Thomas would have approved of this. It's impressive. Coming from Elaine, it was as close to praise as Sarah was likely to receive. Thank you for coming, Sarah said formally. Would you like a tour? The tour was conducted with professional courtesy on both sides, the personal animosity contained within the boundaries of their corporate roles. Emma, initially shy around the grandmother she barely knew, gradually warmed up enough to explain the art therapy room where she sometimes volunteered after school. "You're good with children," Elaine observed as Emma demonstrated the materials available for veterans' families. "I had a good teacher," Sarah replied, nodding toward Michael, who was explaining the clinical facilities to a group of medical professionals. "He showed me that family is built through daily choices, not just blood." Elaine absorbed this, her expression unreadable. "I never understood you," she said finally. "Even as a child, your father did, though." "Yes," Sarah agreed, "he did." No dramatic reconciliation occurred, no tearful embrace or explicit forgiveness. But as Elaine prepared to leave, she hesitated, then reached into her purse and withdrew a small velvet box. "This was your grandmother's. Thomas wanted you to have it, but in the confusion after his death, I kept it." She handed the box to Sarah. "It belongs to you." Inside was an antique locket containing miniature photographs of Sarah's grandparents, Thomas's parents whom she had barely known. "Thank you," Sarah said, genuinely moved by the unexpected gesture. Elaine nodded once, then departed as precisely as she had arrived, leaving behind a small opening where a door had previously been firmly closed. "That was weird," Emma commented as they watched Elaine's car disappear down the driveway. "Is she still the evil grandmother, or is she trying to be nice now?" Sarah laughed, the tension breaking. "People aren't usually all evil or all good, Em. They're complicated. Your grandma Martinez made some very bad choices, but that doesn't mean she can't ever make better ones. Like when I get a math problem wrong, but then figure it out later," Emma suggested. "Something like that," Sarah agreed, "though some problems are harder to fix than others." Michael joined them, having concluded his tour duties. "Everything okay?" Sarah showed him the locket, explaining Elaine's unexpected gift. "It's not exactly peace, but it's something." "Something is better than nothing," Michael observed, "especially with family." They returned to the ceremony, rejoining the celebration of what they had built together. Not just the research wing or the treatment programs, but the life they had constructed from the broken pieces of their individual pasts. A life not defined by what had been lost, but by what had been found along the way. That evening, after the guests had departed and the center had quieted, Sarah found Michael in his office reviewing patient files for the next day's sessions. She perched on the edge of his desk, a familiar position that had become a comfortable routine over the years. "Successful day," she commented. The board was impressed with the clinical outcomes data. "They should be," Michael replied. "The results speak for themselves. 83% improvement rate is unprecedented for PTSD treatment." Sarah nodded, pride evident in her expression. "Do you ever think about that morning in the hospital parking lot?" "Often," Michael admitted. "How different everything would be if I'd followed protocol." "If you'd followed protocol, I might not be here," Sarah said quietly. "Not just because of the medical situation, but because I was looking for someone who would make exactly the choice you made, someone who would put human need above institutional rules." Michael set aside the file he'd been reviewing, giving her his full attention. "I'd make the same choice again, even knowing all the challenges that would follow." Me too," Sarah agreed. "Every decision, every struggle led us here." She gestured around them, encompassing not just the office, but everything it represented. Their work, their family, their shared purpose. Outside the window, the spring twilight was settling over Millbrook, transforming the ordinary small-town landscape into something quietly beautiful. Inside, the warm lamp on Michael's desk created a circle of light around them, a small sanctuary of certainty in a world of constant change. Some things can't be fixed. Sarah said the words, no longer a resignation to loss, but an acknowledgement of reality. But some things don't need to be fixed. Michael completed their shared mantra. They just need to be accepted and loved as they are. Well, Sarah leaned down to kiss him, the simple gesture containing all the complexity of their journey together. From strangers bound by a moment of crisis, to partners united by choice day after day, through challenge and triumph, brokenness and healing. Outside their circle of light, the world continued its imperfect turning. Inside, they had found what humans have always sought in the face of life's inevitable hardships. Not perfection, but connection. Not absence of struggle, but presence of support. Not a life without cracks, but one where the broken places let in light. And in the end, that light, shining through the very fractures they had once tried to hide, illuminated a truth both simple and profound, that our wounds, when shared rather than concealed, become not just sources of pain but pathways to our deepest healing.